Call the regular St. Dimas City Council meeting to order.
Ask you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. First item on our agenda this evening would be a recognition by the Chamber of Commerce and a presentation of the Golden State Water Company for their support with the city's birthday barbecue.
And representatives of the Chamber of Commerce are here and will make their presentation.
Good evening. My name is Terry Muse, and I was the birthday barbecue chair for this year. And we saw just about everyone there, and we know you had a really good time. We tried a few things different this year. You might have noticed we relocated our beverage booth. We had some vehicles on display, just tried some new things to kind of spice it up and had a new band. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. We haven't got all of our numbers in yet to know exactly how we did, but we know that everyone that was there had a great time. And we really could not have done it without the help of Golden State Water. They were phenomenal in assisting us with this event. So that's why we're here today, to do a recognition. And our chamber president and the volunteer chairperson, who knows very intimately how crucial they were to our success, is going to say a few words to make the presentation.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Marilyn Sparks, and I am the chairperson for this fiscal year of the San Dimas Chamber of Commerce. And as Terry mentioned, this event takes a lot of volunteers. About 125 to 130 volunteers are needed to pull off the event of this size. And it's such a great day for the community to come out and celebrate San Dimas through a variety of not just the food, but also the games and events that are activities that are free to the kids of this community. So as Terry mentioned, we could not have pulled it off without the help of Golden State Water. Their employees not only showed up to volunteer, but they volunteered with happy hearts. They broke a sweat, they kept smiling, and they always asked, is there anything else I can do? And at the end of the event, they asked, when's the next event? When can we help again? And so because of their servants' hearts and their commitment to the city of San Dimas, we wanted to recognize them this evening. So could Bob Sproul and Ben Lewis and George Johnston please come up? You know who you are. So on the plaque, it states, San Dimas Chamber of Commerce recognizes and thanks Golden State Water Company for making an impact in our community with outstanding community volunteer involvement, 2018. I'm sorry? What? Oh. Plaque was also made by Margie Green.
I'd like to add to their comments that the water company has been doing this probably longer than some of the people that are giving you a presentation have been alive. This has been a long time tradition. The water company they have been the cooks in the Deep Pit Barbecue for I don't know how many years, but it's a lot. At least as long as we've had the Deep Pit at this site, and even before that. So thank you very much for what you've done and what you're continuing to do. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Bob Sprouse. I'm the CEO of the company. I just want to let everyone know that our company considers it a privilege to provide water service to the great people of San Dimas. And we also consider it an honor to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce and support and provide service to the Chamber. We've had a long history with both the city and the chamber, and on behalf of the company and all the employees that provided help during the birthday barbecue, I want to thank you for this recognition. So thank you.
And next, we want to give some publicity to the San Dimas Fitness Festival, featuring the annual 5K run, the 1 mile fun run, and the Family Bicycle Day, which is on September 22nd, 2018. I believe we must have somebody from Parks and Recreation who's going to tell us about this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As noted, yes, on September 22nd is the annual 5K and other associated runs and bike day. That day is being very diligently worked on and prepared so that September 22nd could be as successful as in years past. I know staff is diligently working to make sure that this event goes off very smoothly, safely, and is as successful as it has been in other years. So you are cordially invited to attend, participate, and help us kick this day off in good fashion, and maybe we can beat some records from years past. Thank you.
Be a lot better if you started about 8:30 or 9 instead of the hour you start. Does city manager still run in the race?
Just to clarify, it's more of a stumble.
Well, I think it's going to be fun to watch the new Parks and Recreation guy run with Councilman Vienna. I think you guys are going to have a great run.
Yeah, it's not a fast pace, but we can do it.
So September the 18th?
September
22nd, pardon me.
Yes.
September the 22nd, and you got to get there early. They have, in the past, had free breakfasts. Unfortunately, they're healthy breakfasts. So people tend to go to a donut stand or Roadies or someplace instead of having a free breakfast. But actually, it's not that bad. They explained it to me one time, that how good for you was, and I thought that it was going to be good for me to eat it because the consequences of not doing it might have been a little harsh. These ladies were persuasive. So, but it is a good time, and there are a lot of events going on around all of that. The people who are serious about running, there's a good opportunity for them, and the race is uphill and downhill and around, and the people in the fun run have a great time. So this is one of the really nice events put on in September by the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we go to oral communications. This is an opportunity to give members of the public an opportunity to address the city council. We have a 3-minute time limit. In order to participate, you come forward to the microphone. We ask that you give us your name and tell us where you live. That is not a requirement to participate in this oral communications. But anybody want to address the city council about any matter?
Good evening, Jim Enriquez, LA County Fire Department. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nicholas, council members, audience, just want to give you a heads up on our current services that begin in addition to our everyday services. The fires, we're going to launch our contract air as we approach our Santa Ana wind conditions. So in addition to our normal brush response, which started on August 15th, we brought on board our heli-tanker, which is that dragonfly-looking helicopter that comes on at first response. So that began August 15th, and then starting September 1st, our additional contract air comes on, and that's our two super scoopers, and that's a CL 415s. And so currently, on a brush response, when somebody dials 911 and reports a brush response or brush fire, our biggest threats, specifically here in San Dimas, is the Walnut Creek area, because you have homes immediately that will be impacted. We currently will launch 3 helicopters. The closest one being, less than a minute flight time out of Brackett Airfield. But starting September 1, you'll now have 7 pieces of air assets. As soon as somebody dials 911, in addition to our 7 engine company ground assets and our dozers, our crews, now you're going to have 7 pieces of air assets, and that will include our 4 helicopters, our 2 super scoopers, as well as our helicopter coordinator. So part of the coordination during a brush fire is we have a chief officer trained in as a helicopter coordinator. Then he coordinates the initial attack between the fixed wing as well as the rotor wing. And so that'll be, again, that services will begin September 1. And as you're aware, tomorrow we graduate a cert class here out of San Dimas, in fact, out of the City Hall here. And so I'm looking forward to that. The graduation ceremony will begin about 7:30, and everybody's encouraged and invited to attend. I'll be there, and it's a great achievement. And specifically, if we're here in the city of San Dimas, now we're going to have another group of individuals that are community-based, are trained to assist the community during an event of a catastrophic incident. So, any questions?
Chief, is that tomorrow or is it Thursday? I thought it
Thursday.
was
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
That is Thursday. That
All
is
right.
Thursday afternoon.
And while you're here, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request, I know we talked about it some time ago, but at some point, the city recognizing Alicia Mejia, who retired this year from the fire department. She continues to volunteer her time, even here with our CERT initiative, and actually has been instructing and coordinating. So if we might be able to do that, that would be
Will
great.
she be here Thursday night?
She will probably be here Thursday, right?
We will
Yeah?
encourage her to attend.
Well, that would be a good opportunity. Unless the logistics have broken down, Mr. Michaelis and I are going to have our radio or our TV show here as a part of the CERT, so we can have live. We think the cameras in here with the other 2 we have, we can get it kind of people get a good idea of what it's about, and we'll have a chance to talk to a couple of the graduates. And so we're planning to give it a good let people know it's happening, and hopefully it'll go well.
Well, I think that's a great idea. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the City Council? If not, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All the items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one motion unless a member of the council would like to remove any item for separate discussion.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the consent calendar and the items thereon. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, that carries by a 5-0 unanimous vote. And then next, we will go to other business. The first item is the interest of certain properties joining the municipal parking district. Elaine?
We recently met with the new owner of the properties at 213 and then 217 to 220 West Bonita. These are what the locals would describe as formerly the train stop building and the building to the west. So those 2 buildings have recently been purchased. We met with the owner, and they have opened their family business called the Puzzle Zoo in the building formerly known as the train stop. And as we met with them, they're interested in their opportunities with these properties into the future. In other words, what kind of uses can they look forward to? And the situation with these 2 properties is that they're just outside the city's parking district in the downtown area, which means that any use that they would propose or desire for those properties would need to provide on-site parking sufficient for that use. In other words, if it's a restaurant use, then they would need to provide on-site parking that would reflect the standards for restaurant parking for that property. That does present a limiting factor as far as being able to use those properties for uses that require a higher parking ratio. And so in meeting with them and also in kind of reviewing the situation, staff is well aware of the private and council interest in being able to consider if there's a way to deal with parking in this particular area so that more uses could be considered. So what we did is we kind of looked at a research project to see the last time or the last couple of times that properties have been added to the district. One of the most recent was probably when the Begin building was constructed a while back. And there was a process involved in having that building join the district. But we're looking for one where, in that case, they provided on-site parking as well as parking that was dedicated to the district, which would be used for public parking as well. The one that kind of matched the situation that we have with respect to these properties on Bonita, the last time that something happened was in 1987. There was a property on Monte Vista, and the situation that the City Council used at that time was to take a look at what the properties paid when they joined the district back as early as 1971. And it was basically 50 cents per square foot of the size of the parcel of the property. And there was a calculation made as far as the frontage foot of the property is another way to determine their contribution toward the annual maintenance of the parking district, which was set in 1971 at 25 cents per front foot. In other words, if it's a 50-foot lot in width, then they would pay $12.50 per year in maintenance for their share of the district maintenance. And so we looked at that as a potential way to be able to consider, if the council so desired, a means to be able to have properties join the district from the Bonita address site. So what we did is the staff report before you this evening provides a general overview of the parking district's history, how it came to be, and some background to it. And then it takes the issue of the 115 North Monte Vista from 1987 and takes a look at the 50-cent number that was used at that time to be able to prepare an assessment. And if you update that number to today's, what that value would be in today's numbers, it would be $1.13 per square foot. And so we applied that to the size of the two parcels, which are basically just under 7,000 feet, both of them. And so that would result in an assessment of just under $8,000. And what happened in 1987 with respect to the maintenance costs is they went back to 1971 and back charged that property from 1971 forward to 1987, and then used that as a calculated number to also buy into the district. So if we, in this sense, the 25-cent number had never really been updated, and so we used the same 25-cent number in this case, but just took the issue going back from today to 1971. So if we did that in the same format, then the maintenance back fee would be $582 rounded. So a potential way would be each property basically would pay a one-time expense of just under $8,500 per parcel. And with that payment and then other requirements of the district, then they would be, those properties would be considered within the parking district, so that parking needs or demands for particular uses could be addressed by the district and not necessarily all having to come from on-site parking for those, any particular use that requires more parking that's currently available. So we had the opportunity to meet with the owner to kind of present this as a draft idea and went over the numbers and the concepts. Generally, joining the district always took the properties at the time the way they were, kind of as is. In other words, the size of the buildings, the uses of the buildings, which haven't changed a great deal since 1971, but it did consider that if you join the district, it would consider that the current use of your building or its parking demands would really be consistent or not necessarily change over time, because the thought is with a parking district, if it provides the parking, then property within the district expands their uses or they expand their buildings, then it could result in a higher demand for parking that the parking district can't meet. So one of the things that was kind of a rule of thumb as the parking district was set up is that everyone would keep the same building footprint or the size of their building as a way to kind of make sure that there is parking sufficient from the district to meet all of the business needs. So it was one of the things that we kind of put on the table with this particular circumstances when they joined the district, that it wouldn't necessarily allow them a chance to build a building that would take up the entire side of the property. There would still be some setback requirements, or even if we did what others have done, they would keep the same building footprint and the building wouldn't grow. The use could change, but the building wouldn't necessarily grow. So that was one of the things that we had talked with him about. There's a little bit of a complication with one of the properties, the train stop or Puzzle Zoo property. It does have a second story, and it had a residential use for a while, but it has not had residential use for some time. The experience of residential uses in a parking district is a little bit unique. Usually parking districts are kind of made for the retail, commercial type of parking. In other words, it's for customers. Customers come and go. They would park, as you know, if they parked anywhere in the district, then they would be able to, it would hopefully be proximate to the business and convenient for them to use as a commercial or retail customer. When it comes to residential, there's probably a different expectation with parking, is that it would be readily available for the tenant who lives there. It would be available for the tenant 24 hours a day, regardless of whatever the retail or commercial time, and it would be proximate or close to the residential unit. So the staff did bring that question or issue forward in the staff report that's before you. But in meeting with the owner just would simply like to be able to understand not only what it means to be part of the district, but also some level of interpretation on the second floor of the train stop building, or the Puzzle Zoo building. I need to update myself completely. So in other words, in the review of this as a city council, that's kind of a specific question. If the council has any specific ideas or feelings with respect to the potential uses for the second floor, should the property become part of the district. In other words, would it be open for retail, commercial, office, or residential? Or the way it's set up now is that it's being used for storage, which obviously does not create an extraordinary parking demand, because it's just used for storage and not necessarily for any other use. So that staff would recommend that the council, when you start to discuss this, that would be one of the points you would discuss and consider is what direction might you give with respect to uses on the second floor? Would there be some options that you'd be willing to take a look at as far as uses? So at that point, I think what's before you then is to taking the 1987 experience of adding a property to the district, updating that to the current process and costs, and having that before you as a potential means to be able to address these two properties and their interest in exploring joining the district. And then, so at that point, I think I'll pause and see if there's any questions of staff, and then I would like to introduce the owner to come forward and give his thoughts, but just wanted to pause and see if there's any questions that the council may have at this point.
Well, you mentioned the footprint and that they're paying a certain assessment every year based on the footprint.
It's not, it's based on the front foot of the parcel, so it's just the width of the lot.
Okay. Their initial contribution, though, was based on the square
It was based
footage.
upon the total square footage of the parcel.
Okay, and so would this person, if they join the parking district, based on their square footage of the parcel? So then it doesn't matter if they add a little bit, like, let's just say there's a building, and well, two questions. Let's say it changes from retail to restaurant. That doesn't change their contribution to the parking district, is that right?
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. So, no, it would not. Once you're in the district and you paid in, but one of the reasons or ways that you would kind of make sure that the district always had sufficient parking would be to take a look at expanding buildings or expanding uses beyond the footprint. Because then if many in the district wanted to take advantage of that, it could be to the situation where the overall use starts of businesses in the district starts to creep up on parking demand, and then the district would not be able to provide the parking that would be able to meet all of the needs of those properties in the district. I forgot to mention one thing. One of the thoughts that staff had also is that it was not unusual when the parking district was established to have the businesses provide on-site parking on their own property as a way to be able to, and I think it has an advantage to the owner because that can be employee or business owner parking, but it also demonstrates their good faith effort to, because if you've got a property that cannot be a restaurant any other way except to be part of a district, and you do your best to provide on-site parking to kind of lighten the load or address some of the demand that may be coming with your business, then that is another feature that staff thought might be a reasonable approach, is that those properties joining the district would do what others in the district have done to be able to maximize on-site parking as much as possible. And we're talking about, not very many spaces at all, because there's not much left after the building is on the site and setbacks are applied. So, but on the other hand, it's considered a good faith effort that they would do the best they could to provide on-site parking. But I would point out also that many businesses that have done, especially on the north side of the parking district, that's where they park as the owner or their employees, freeing up the rest of the spaces for customers.
The other question is, if somebody's got a building, and let's say they turn it into a restaurant, and then they expand the use by putting a patio of some kind on the side of it, not where parking was provided, like you're saying, maybe there's some parking in the back they can provide, but this is an area where there really isn't, it's just not configured right for parking. Does that change the contribution to the parking district?
Once the city approves them being a parking in the district by setting the standards for it, then there would not be any other assessment. Unless, I think you should keep it open that if there's a major change that you may want to revisit that in the future. But no, this would allow a property to be parked as a restaurant and have the parking requirements met. And if they added outdoor dining, it wouldn't create an additional parking demand that would need to be dealt with an additional contribution.
And so let me make sure I understand. So let's use the Puzzle Zoo building, okay? Currently, they're restricted to storage on the second floor. Okay, our discussion tonight would be if we would entertain at some future time office space and or even senior housing. If that was to occur, then we would say if they had 4 senior housing or senior apartments or something, we would hope that they would be able to supply 4 or 6 on-site parking spaces.
Well, what's before you would be that they would do as much as they could. But let's say they could do 4 and they have 6 units. Then the other 2 units, if it was a senior project, maybe you'd be willing to approve that because the parking is normally more limited with a senior project. But on the other hand, if they couldn't park on site, then they would have to park somewhere in the district because the city does not allow overnight parking on the streets. And so those tenants or those residents would need to park somewhere in the district.
Okay, and so they're allowed to actually park in the district overnight?
Well, we'd have to make that finding. One of the things I guess that's interesting is the property on Monte Vista that was, when it was brought into the district, actually the city redevelopment agency bought that property, as you all know, in the early 2000s and converted that to parking to be able to release some of the parking needs of the senior projects that's above the hardware store. And that was more proximate and dealt with giving those folks a convenient place to park and proximate place to park. So
Yeah, and that's not a part of the parking district. That's a part of the senior, part of the housing authority.
right. I think it might be helpful to introduce the owner if you'd like to meet him and see if there are any comments that he might have. And I think at the same time, this is really set up for your discussion to be able to explore and the directions you'd like to pursue with this. The recommendation is that we would take the direction you have this evening and bring it back in a resolution form at a future meeting to be able to adopt it. So what's looked for tonight is your discussion and your direction, and then we'll prepare a resolution according to your direction tonight. But I'd like to introduce Jay. Jay and I are on a first name basis because I can't pronounce his last name, but on the other, it's been a pleasure to meet him. So Jay, if you'd like to introduce yourself and give any thoughts that you like.
My name is Jay Demirchift, owner of Puzzle Zoo, one of the owners of Puzzle Zoo. It's a family business. My brother is here as well. So we've been, just want to tell you a little bit about Puzzle Zoo. We've been in business for 25 years, celebrating 25 years this year actually. We sell toys and games for children. And we have stores in Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, South Coast Plaza, and lastly, the last store we opened was San Dimas, so it's here. And I want to say, I want to thank everybody here in Mold bringing this to the table, everybody that worked on it. And really, we agree pretty much with everything the staff is recommending, except the use of, Blaine talked about it, the use of second floor of our Puzzle Zoo, above Puzzle Zoo store, which we don't know what we're gonna do. I mean, we're using it, we're gonna be using it for a long time probably, but if Puzzle Zoo was becoming 10 store or 15 store chain, we would need more storage. We might have to go get it, you know, a warehouse or something. And so we'd like to be able to use the second floor to, we don't know what, but like it was mentioned, either housing or offices or something in those lines. So if we're getting into parking district, we'd love to have what everybody else has, I guess, in the parking district. So.
Well, welcome to San Dimas.
Thank you.
One of the things we also have considered when we talked about this and previously is that if there was some additional charge, particularly if it were senior housing, which we're under pressure to create, it's entirely possible that the housing authority could actually pay for whatever it had to be paid into the authority, to the parking authority or the district. So I think when we talked about that, I don't think there was a concern that with that amount of space on the second floor, that's going to be a problem. I think we don't know exactly the formula or how to write that up. I think the staff can probably work on that. But I think this deal is a commitment essentially that you'll be able to develop to use your property, the building that's there. You do have parking in the back, which you are using and making that effort. So I think the idea of being able to buy into the district on the same basis that someone else bought in. Originally, the merchants bought in. I mean, and the price they paid at the time when the land was probably worth $2 a foot, they paid 50 cents a foot to get into the district, was a little, but the way the calculation was done to bring it down to a current value, it seemed like that was a number that made sense for you, made sense for the city, and so I think that the city staff believes this is all workable. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, I don't think anybody wants to tell you to just store stuff above you.
You're supposed to get under, nobody got under a desk or anything? Come on.
Andy, I assume you'll give us some kind of an assessment?
When these happen, I was thinking of four shock, so just a heads up. But again, just a reminder to serve, this is why they're out there with these events.
Mr. Mayor,
Again, exits are right here. Yeah. We get out the building, that's the right there.
Mr. Mayor, can we recess for 5 minutes? Call family.
I think
Sure.
it'd be a good idea.
Yes.
Why don't you announce that?
Okay, we're taking a short recess so people can call their families or.
Right now,
Oh, really? That's funny. Yeah, yeah.
We're back in session. Blaine, were you
So I
you
think,
up when we quit?
yeah, unless there's any other questions of Jay or,
I'd like to just comment a little bit on this if we're ready for the discussion. Are we there? Yep, okay. I appreciate the uses, but I think that the idea of restricting the property, I'm not that fond of. I understand it's being used for storage right now, and that works for their current situation, but in the near future, with the gold line coming and all these other things that's going to be happening, it could potentially be commercial retail, it could potentially be senior homes, and I wouldn't just limit it to senior homes. People, younger would probably be interested in living in the downtown corridor, and there's been a lot of interest, even discussion here on how do we do that, and so I understand that might be a little bit more taxing on the parking district, younger folks, and maybe 2 vehicles and those types of things. But I wouldn't want to limit them as we're not there yet, and they're not there yet. So I don't know how we do that, or if there's any interest to go kind of that way. But that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. I would hate to put a restriction on here for something we don't know about, and I don't think the owner knows about at this point. I've had many conversations with them. We actually met here at City Hall with Blaine and Ken and Kurt, and when we talked about this very thing, is we don't know, and he doesn't know what he wants. I mean, he didn't have a clue about what the parking district was until, he had already bought here and then figured out he didn't have any parking, so to expand. And he has that interest of the church property. He doesn't know if he's gonna have to tear it down, or if he's going to be able to retain a wall, or we just don't know what it's going to be. We kind of hope it's going to be a restaurant, but we don't know what it's going to be. But no, I don't think we should apply any lengthy restrictions on it at all. I mean, with that being said, I don't know.
Well, I think that was the consensus.
Yeah.
That we don't want to charge for a buy-in to the district that may never be used. So if we were charging, since all of the front feet were all single story of the owners of the district, now that is the equity owners of it, this we'd have to charge more. And I don't think we felt that when we were talking about that, Emmett, and actually we had a subcommittee of Blaine, Emmett, and me that met with them to talk about this, and I think we had a good conversation that this can all work. And there was a precedent for having somebody buy into the district and a way that was calculated then. So I don't think we're putting restrictions on. I think what we're really doing, and I thought what we were primarily looking for tonight, and I blink and enlighten us, is that whether the council agrees to the concept of the buy-in to the district, and because it turns out that this, in some areas of the district, parking is not in real long supply. At this particular end of the district, it is.
Well, then, Mr. Mayor, I might propose then on that C item that uses of the second floor of the Puzzle Zoo building could potentially include residential, commercial, or as approved by council. And in that way, the use, because it doesn't sound like it's going to be determined anytime soon, is open, and it will come back to council. To me, limiting it seems, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's good, and we're directing staff to bring back a resolution memorializing that, so I agree.
The concept of the buy-in and the price and everything is okay with everybody?
I think that seems fair.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the staff recommendation, filling in the blanks with housing, office, or as approved by the city
Second.
council. Does that work?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and second for
Just a
that.
question on what,
Yes.
the staff report, and we had that talk about trying to provide maximum parking on the site as well. Does the council consider that as a restriction, or is that okay to include as a concept?
I think I'd put it as a concept.
I like the idea of him doing his best. I don't know what the maximum number of parking spots is. It might be, if you take both those properties together, it might be 10, I'm not sure.
I think it'd be just a concept, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I'm not looking at it as a restriction. It's more of a general rule.
Yeah, that's what I think we ought to look at it that way too.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other clarification
No.
or enlightenment you want from us?
No.
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, we've approved what we've talked about, and you can go ahead with the process.
Thank you very much.
And we all appreciate your business there. I haven't been inside, but the outside's looking good.
That's great. Well, stop by anytime.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have now concluded down to item number 6, which is a public hearing. And this is a public hearing involving property that is within too close to where I live for me to be able to participate. So I will excuse myself and turn the matter over to John.
Well, thank you. All right, this is a continuation of a public hearing. We had started the public hearing at the last meeting, August 14th, and we're continuing it today. It's item 6 on the agenda. It goes by the name of the Walnut Avenue project, and just to orient people to where that is, that's on Walnut Avenue, north of City Hall. It's bounded by Juanita and some houses on the north. The east has Basilio and some houses. The south has Moore Place and Moore Lane and some houses. And to the west, there's Walnut Avenue, and across that is the town core with 3rd Street. So what's before us tonight, same as last time, we did not reach a decision last time, are 2 ordinances. One is a zone change from 16,000 square foot minimum lots to 7,500 square foot lots. The second is an overlay zone, which would add some standards and restrictions to whatever zoning is on the property. And then there's a tentative tract map that the applicant has proposed with the street and the lots laid out. And then there's a declaration on the environmental assessment. Staff is going to give a report on this, but let me just mention that this is a continuation, so all the information and things that were said, observations and thoughts that came forward last time are part of this decision, so that they all apply today. On the other hand, we're going to reopen the public hearing, and people have a chance to speak. The applicant has a chance to speak. You're invited to come up at that point and say whatever you want. You can plow old ground or plow new ground, but as long as it's within the purview of the city council for this piece of property. So I think with that, one other thing. Last week we had a great suggestion about numbering the pages of these lengthy staff reports. And so the pages of the staff report that came out today are numbered, as a matter of fact. So if you look in your agenda packet on the bottom right hand of each page, there's a page number. regardless of what exhibit it is or anything like that. They may have their own page numbers if they're part of an exhibit, but the only thing is that last week's, or 2 weeks ago, agenda packet is the same. It's basically everything you got last time, which is probably a couple hundred pages, and there are lots of appendixes and numbers and everything. So we'll do our best to find things if we need to find them in that part. But the ones from this week are numbered and look like they're pretty easy to find and refer to. With that, we're going to have a staff report, and Blaine?
Jennifer has a staff report, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Just to pick up from where the Mayor Pro Tem left off, at the last meeting, the staff report was given, public hearing was held, the applicant spoke, and those for and against the project had a chance to speak. At the conclusion of that, there was council discussion. There had been a motion to approve the project and adopt the ordinances and resolutions as per the Planning Commission's direction. That motion failed, and there was additional discussion by the council. Staff was directed, and a motion passed to direct staff to continue the public hearing and to direct staff to meet with the applicant to resolve 3 specific points that were raised. And so, in follow-up to that, staff met with the applicant last week and discussed those 3 points. Probably the most clear point from what we had direction and we're trying to come to resolution with the applicant was related to the development standard and the overlay zone for a rear yard setback, a minimum requirement. If you recall from the last meeting, the Planning Commission had recommended a minimum 12-foot rear yard setback requirement, and that had been included in the prior resolution. Staff had suggested a minimum of 15 be considered, and the applicant had preferred at the time no minimum rear yard setback requirement be established. After meeting with the applicant last week, it's our impression from that meeting that the applicant would be agreeable to comply with that 15-foot minimum rear yard setback in order to facilitate the project. On the other 2 points, which had to do with 2-story restrictions, the number of single-story versus 2-story homes, if you recall, the Planning Commission had recommended that those lots adjacent to Walnut Avenue be limited to 1 story in height. So that would have been lot 1 of the 12 lots in the subdivision. The staff recommendation had been to consider perhaps 20 to 40% of the lots, which would result in 3 to 5 of the 12 lots at 1 story in height. From meeting with the applicant last week, it's our impression that the applicant accepts the Planning Commission's recommendation of limiting lot 1 to single story, but would not like to would prefer that no other lots be limited to 1 story in height. And on the 3rd point, on the floor area ratio, where the Planning Commission had recommended the 55% max floor area ratio, including the garage area, and staff had recommended a 45% floor area ratio, not including the first 400 square feet of the garage, but any square footage after that. And the applicant's preference had been to not incorporate a floor area ratio. After meeting with the applicant, it's our impression that no floor area ratio or restriction be imposed, but if there was going to be some sort of restriction because of concerns on future expansion, the applicant would prefer agreeing potentially to a maximum unit size that would accommodate the project as proposed with no revisions, but limit any potential future additions or expansions to that. So in summary, this was basically a report back on that meeting that we had with the applicant. We also wanted to just provide a little more information on tree removals. There were some concerns expressed by some of the council members on the number of trees proposed to be removed. The tree plan shows 134 trees currently on site, and 3 of those trees being retained and the other 131 to be taken out. The 3 trees that are shown to be preserved on the plan are highlighted in green on the slide. Those are 3 oak trees. There are at least 11 mature oak trees that are proposed to be removed. I will note too that of those 134, there are a number, over 60 of them are part of the citrus grove, so it does kind of pull those numbers up a little bit. But even Without those, there's over 70 or so that are not part of the grove. Wanted to note too that the tree removal permit, and the development plan review board applications for the actual specific site and architectural design of the homes are not a part of the applications before you tonight. Those were reviewed by the development plan review board at its March 8th, 2018 meeting. And at the time, the board had determined to allow the related applications that are before the council tonight to move forward, with the logic or understanding that if there are changes to the tract map, if the zoning is or isn't approved, if the development standards are incorporated, that could have significant changes on the way that the houses are designed, significant or minor changes, but that would result in some changes. We should note, though, that approving the tract map likely would result in at least the removal of 6 oak trees due to their location of being in the street or right dead center in the lot. There could be some additional oak trees that could possibly be preserved pending final review of the site plan and the house plans by the board. We've expressed to the applicant that some council members had desire to see additional trees preserved, or may want to look into that a little further. So in conclusion, we have included ordinances and resolutions in Exhibit A for you tonight. They are drafted per the Planning Commission's recommendation on the project, with the one exception being an amendment to the rear yard setback being changed from 12 feet to 15 feet per the discussion at the prior to the council meeting. I also just wanted to clarify on that same item, we did modify the language just slightly to clarify that unenclosed patio covers that are detached would be exempt from that 15-foot. That's common throughout the single-family zone in the city to allow those sorts of structures to encroach from the rear yard, so that they would be exempt from that requirement. Staff's recommendation hasn't changed from the prior meeting. We're still recommending approval of the project, but with the modifications, not just on the rear yard setback, which is incorporated, but also the floor area ratio and the 2-story allowance. However, just to be clear, the ordinances and resolutions for you are per the Planning Commission's recommendation. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just one question. That the corner house, the single story, was the Planning Commission's recommendation 12 feet, or was it 8 feet? I keep remembering 8 feet somewhere here.
The Planning Commission's recommendation was to retain 12 feet on Lot 1 as well. The applicant had presented that meeting was continued as well, because we had 2 Planning Commission meetings, one in June and one in July. The applicant had provided a proposal to look at potentially as close as, I believe, as 8 feet was the number, but the Planning Commission's determination was to keep the recommendation at 12, even for that lot.
Okay, then the next question is, the footprint of the house, that single-story house, to change from the 12 to the 15, how much is that in a reduction of the home?
Well, the only plan that has been formally submitted is still showing the 2-story, so that would basically be if those development standards were adopted, then they would have to revise what that is. I can tell you what the current configuration is. Lot 1 is currently sited at 11.5 feet, but it's a 2-story design at this point in time.
So do we think the footprint would be larger if it's now a single-story house?
One thing that we do have that has been incorporated, and I think staff and Planning Commission are both supportive of, is on the 1-story limitations. Typically, the maximum lot coverage allowed is 35%, and so they would be allowed an increase to 40%, so they would get an extra 5% of lot coverage to give them some more flexibility in adding some footage to the property.
Okay.
And
Thank
at a 40% lot coverage on Lot 1,
3,000.
yeah, 3,200 square feet would be permitted total coverage. 3,200. That would include anything with a roof, so garage, porch, patio, house.
Okay.
So you could still get, over 2,000 square foot house and a 3-car, 2-car garage.
Okay, would a difference between 12 feet and 15 feet make any significant difference?
I mean, you just.
Of house size.
Not too substantial. I can show you, we had included in the prior report. This is from last meeting's PowerPoint. I can show you the exhibit that was done. If the computer unfreezes. So this was provided at the last meeting in the PowerPoint, but it basically shows you if you were to apply the standard front and side yard setbacks of 20, 10, and 12, and then a 15-foot rear yard setback. Now this isn't a recommendation on how the house should be designed. This is just showing the buildable area per those setbacks.
So now we're talking 4,000 square, or about 4,000 or so. Buildable.
Correct. So 3,200 square feet of buildable area would be available. The setbacks would allow up to 3,400. So actually your lot coverage is limiting it before, it's within about 200 square feet of what the lot coverage would allow versus what the setbacks allow. But if you run the analysis, the setbacks would allow about up to 3,400 square feet. However, the lot coverage would limit the buildable area to about 3,200 square feet.
If we allowed for that single piece of property, 12-foot easement setback, would it make a noticeable difference in the way the track lays out? And the rest of them are 15 feet?
In my opinion, I don't think it would make a noticeable difference, but maybe Larry can say
If you
he feels
took the
differently.
if you took the 3 feet out of that diagram, what you've done is you've increased the buildable area by about 240 square feet to about 3,680. But because of the 40% lot coverage, you haven't increased the potential size of the house. It's still 40% times 8,017, so it's still a little over 3,200 square feet. So you may have given him a little bit more flexibility in terms of how he shapes the house, within the buildable area by expanding out the 3 feet. But you've not changed the maximum potential size of the house by changing from 12 to 15.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. We have 2 ordinances and 2 resolutions. Which one deals with the floor area ratio?
The second one?
Correct.
The second ordinance.
The second ordinance, correct?
1263.
1263. And is staff recommending that we go along with what the Planning Commission recommended?
No. The staff is recommending a different FAR than the Planning Commission recommended.
Well, I know that, but I meant after you discussed it with the builder.
We did not change our recommendation after meeting with the developer. The only thing that came out of that discussion that was different, 2 things came out of that discussion. The first was that he would prefer you just put a square footage cap, up to X square feet, as opposed to using an FAR methodology to calculate the maximum buildable area. The second thing that came out of that was you did ask us to do a survey of surrounding cities, and we have attached that to the staff report. And
page 35.
Is it page 35?
Numbered that way, and it's
And
pretty easy to find.
the thing that you will see is that if you looked at the other cities who use floor area ratio on a 7,500 square foot lot, they're another 600 to 800 square feet smaller than if we used the staff's recommendation. The staff's recommendation is about 250 square feet, plus or minus, smaller than the Planning Commission's recommendation in terms of the maximum buildable area. I think the real question is, is what is the appropriate size house on a 7,500 square foot lot in an infill condition? If you think that the houses that are proposed are the appropriate size, then you should go with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If you think the houses are at least a little bit too big, you should probably consider the staff's recommendation. If you think the houses are a lot too big, then you probably need to have a more restrictive number in there. There's not a right answer to what is the appropriate size of the house. We had a lot of discussion about the sizes of the houses around it and provided some information about it, both the square footage, building height, etc. But so that's the real question. If you tell me which of those three you are, then I can figure out, how to write a standard, whether it's an FAR or whether it's a square footage cap. But the feel is, what is the right sized house for a 7,500 square foot lot? Because of the 12 lots, I think eight of them are pretty much 7,500 square feet. There's only a couple that are slightly above the minimum square footage. And so it's really easy to do a comparison. But that's the thought you should have. Is it the right size? Is it a little bit too big? Or is it a lot too big? And if you can decide kind of those, then I can figure out how to do numbers.
Just as a point of clarity, though, the ordinance is drafted based off the Planning Commission's recommendation, correct?
That is correct. The only point that changed was the 12 to the 15 per the discussion last council meeting.
Thank you.
Jennifer, you've put up a floor area ratio diagram, and were you going to give us a little tutorial on what floor area ratio means?
Just to supplement, you had the survey in your packet, so I've included the summary of that for the other cities that we surveyed and what that would result on a 7,500 square foot lot. And then the diagram was just for the benefit of trying to communicate a little bit better about what different floor area ratios. Now, this might apply more for like a commercial situation where you're looking at 8 stories and 4 stories, but basically just to show lot coverage being one calculation that we look at percentage of the lot that's covered with structures, which doesn't make a differentiation between first and second. It's just whatever percentage of the lot is covered, as compared to the floor area ratio, which incorporates looking at additional stories in a way to address massing and scale.
Right, and lot coverage usually includes all the structures on the property, like a garage or covered patio, that kind of thing. So that's lot coverage.
Correct.
And so in the single-story example we were talking about on the corner lot of Walnut and 3rd Street, then that's where lot coverage comes in. When these different cities have done their floor area ratios, there's as many different ways of doing it as there are cities, apparently, because some will say, we're just going to take the entire sum of all the different structures that are covered, like garage, the patios, the porches, that kind of thing, and we're going to get a number out of that. Others say, we're going to do just a living area, and then we're going to exclude the garage, we might exclude the porch or that kind of thing. So in the end, what I think you provided in that one page 35 is a good example of what you would get on a 7,500 square foot lot from these different cities' ways of doing it, and you show the garage being included or not. But anyhow, so, and there's even some that have I've been reading these things, they'll have like, you can allow for the garage if you can't see the garage from the street. So if it's like in the back or somehow on the side or I don't know what, otherwise you can't. But anyhow. Okay, so any other questions on the floor area ratio calculations? I had a couple questions just about trees. But before I get into trees, it's all sort of about planting area stuff. The rain gardens that are being proposed as to address the water retention, and that's the low impact development, is that what the LID stands for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so trying to not let water just run out into the street. Those rain gardens, two questions, are they all outside the public right-of-way, so they're not in the street, even if the right-of-way includes grass for the development? And are some of them in the backyard, I think, and I thought staff had some thoughts on that.
That's correct, but as proposed on the plan, there are rain or rock gardens located in both the front and rear yards. They would be located out of the right-of-way. But the way that the conditions of approval are currently written on the tentative tract map, which is resolution 2018-47, I'll refer you to the condition. It's condition 31, which is on page 22 of it's Exhibit A, page 22. Basically,
Page 20,
in consult,
what page is that?
it's on page 22, and it's number 31.
Thank you.
And so that's the tentative tract map resolution, 2018-47. And basically, in consultation with both our Public Works Department and our city engineer, there was concerns expressed about that there are many different ways to comply with low impact development requirements. There are different alternatives, and it's up to the designer to propose and the city to approve that. The particular method of compliance that is represented on the current tract map, both Public Works and the city engineer had expressed concerns about long-term maintenance, that these areas may tend to be filled or disturbed. People want to do patios, pools, slabs with patio furniture in their backyard, and that they're not maintained. And so the condition currently reads that rain gardens or any type of above-ground treatment will generally not be acceptable, and that LID devices shall be underground, and that they can be reviewed and approved by the city engineer. This discussion came up at the Planning Commission meeting. It was the developer's preference to use the method that had been proposed. One of our ways to kind of leave some discretion if there was a situation on a particular lot that maybe the city engineer would accept was we added the word generally. If you read rain gardens or any type of above ground treatment will generally not be acceptable. That gives the city engineer the authority to make the determination. As an aside too, there can be some aesthetic concerns from a planning perspective with how they're done, if plantings can actually grow, what it can support in terms of landscaping. But the primary reason for including that, and if you'll notice, that's under the engineering conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to just talk, and we talked about this last time, I'd like to ask about trees and street trees. And the first thing, I asked that Jennifer provide the street tree designation plan or palette, whatever you call it. And so it's on the dais, and it shows all the streets in San Dimas and the trees that are available or suggested to be planted. So for example, if you live on 4th Street and you want to put a tree in your front, the city to put a tree in your front yard, there's 3 different choices there that you might get, and you generally get to choose the one that you like. But we've seen that in action, and so that makes the street sort of consistent with the trees. But I was just wondering about that street tree palette, what the purpose of that is, and does it have any bearing on our being designated as a tree city? We have that designation.
Certainly, I would, the tree palette would contribute to having continuity on the street, providing that aesthetic presentation where you have an established tree for those neighborhoods. I think it definitely contributes to the character to have that consistent. As far as whether or not it's a critical point in designation of a tree city, I can't answer that. Okay. I'm sorry.
I don't know if Mr. Kisterman might have something on that.
It has no bearing on Tree City status.
Okay.
Tree City wants you to have a comprehensive tree maintenance program, tree management program and policy, but nothing relating to a specific palette.
Got it. Okay, thanks so much. I did want to talk about street trees, and I had a PowerPoint with 3 slides. I don't know if you could put it up, put the first one up. But the first slide is just going to be the, if we were to require street trees, and I know at one point the staff was insisting that there would be street trees along this street, which would be the 300 block of 3rd Street. Here are the trees from our palette that could be used. And I think the developer would probably have a choice on those. And these would be planted by the developer, but maintained by the city. They're in the public right-of-way, and the city takes care of them. Obviously, we want the property owners to water them if they can, but we usually give them a little bit of a help with some water when they're first planted. Could you go to the next slide? So one of the concerns about the street trees is that there's not enough room to plant the street trees. This is a drawing I did, so forgive any kind of odd art or anything like that, but this is 6th Street, which is actually a very nice street not too far from here. It's a little narrow. It has parking only on one side. You'll notice that the pavement width is 26 feet, and that allows for a 4-foot parkway on each side with trees and a 5-foot sidewalk. Throw in the curbs and whatever inches or so that maybe not be included in that those rounded numbers, and you'll see that the width of the entire installation, let's call it that, of a street, parkway, and sidewalk is only 45 feet. Now, we've got 50 feet of right-of-way that we've asked or mandated that the applicant dedicate. And Jennifer, would this kind of an idea work? Would a little bit narrower street than, say, our regular width streets throughout the town core? But this narrower street, would that maybe help us get some street trees in there?
Staff believes that the curb-to-curb width at minimum should be 36 feet, not 26 feet, for various reasons.
Curb-to-curb?
Curb-to-curb. So where John has 26, we believe the absolute minimum should be 36.
36.
That allows for parking on both sides and 2 travel lanes, essentially 9 feet each. And we believe that for safety reasons. We believe 6th Street is, while it's nice and attractive, is really an anomaly. I don't think we have any other streets, certainly public streets, that are as narrow as 6th Street. It's a pretty short street. In this case, we are not that far from Extrand School, and we've all seen parking come this far down Walnut and could conceivably occur on this street when there are events and activities. And so whatever, and what we ended up doing in this case is we had a lot of debate over street width, as part of this application. And I think normally we would ask for a full 60 feet, 36-foot curb to curb, and then sidewalk and parkway. The problem with that is that if I require that much right away, there would be at least one less lot in this subdivision because there are too many lots right at the minimum, and the right of way doesn't count as part of the lot. And so when we looked at and debated back and forth what would be the appropriate street width, we settled on 36-foot curb to curb, and then we're taking 7 feet on each side of the street to put a curb-adjacent sidewalk and then a utility easement behind the sidewalk, which really doesn't leave room for a parkway tree. I believe we included a requirement for tree planting in the front yard, but on the private portion of the front yard. And if there was a desire, we could have a designated or preferred tree, for that purpose. But we believe if the idea is to get a parkway and a sidewalk, that we should still maintain 36 feet curb to curb under any circumstance. The reason we eliminated the tree is because there really isn't much room. The other thing that has come into play in terms of having parkways between the curb and the sidewalk is the drought tolerant regulations that the state has imposed on us essentially prohibit turf in those areas. And I think you'll say that the most common planting in San Dimas in a parkway is probably turf and a parkway tree. There are others, but today you can't put lawn there because you can't irrigate. If it's less than 8 feet in width, you can't irrigate it under the drought tolerant regulations. So what you would end up with is some form of ground cover drought tolerant landscaping that you could use drip or something like that to maintain if you had a parkway. So when we weighed all of those factors, we essentially, and we probably weren't unanimous internally in this discussion, we ended up with the 50 and then that. But the staff believes very strongly that we shouldn't reduce the 36-foot curb to curb.
Okay, understand. Just during my comment portions, we'll go back to this and keep it handy. But I do have one more slide after this, and the question that goes along with this slide is we have had these different developments over time, and these are, I don't know if these are all of them, all the ones on public streets that are more than a couple houses, more than one house. But you'll see that except for one where we've got a horse trail, instead of anything else in the off the street in the public right of way. In every one of these cases, we've required street trees to be planted. And so my question for this was, why are we not requiring it this time? And I think I wanted to ask that question, put this up for the applicant so he can see it, so he can react to it as well. And then I think, Larry, you've answered my question. I mean, if there's any other comments about why we're not requiring it, that's fine. But that was my point in having this one up.
And I think we would prefer that our maintenance be on public property when we're maintaining street trees. And in this case, because we accepted the narrower street, we simply didn't think there was room for a street tree. We're trying to accommodate by having some planting requirement of a tree, but it would be a private tree subject to, the normal city tree regulations, but not maintained by the city. Over the course of time, some of those could change, but again, we could specify that we want each lot to have a specific tree, and we want it planted within a specified distance of the sidewalk, and and then we could evaluate that with subsequent tree removal permits. But that was at least our thinking as to why not in this particular case, different than the other cases that that are cited as examples. And those go back, I didn't realize, some of those go back quite a while. We haven't had too many subdivisions either, and we haven't had, some of those are actually, I think both Sherrilmar and, Sherrilmar not, that was a small parcel map. Commercial, the lots already existed, and in the neighborhood, it was very well established. So to do something different than the neighborhood in those cases would have not been a very smart approach. And I think the only one that had, Canterbury had new streets, Brandywine had new streets, Baseline, Cataract, I think that did have new streets, but it had the horse trail exception.
Okay, great. All right, I don't have any more questions. Any other questions from anybody? Okay.
No.
All right, well, thank you, staff, for that. And so now we're going to open the public hearing, reopen the public hearing, actually. This is a continuation of last week's. We're going to give the applicant a chance to speak if he so desires. He doesn't have to. After that, we're going to let anybody who wants to speak, whether you're for or against or have mixed feelings, come up and talk. And then after that, the applicant would have a chance to respond. And again, you can go over old things, respond to just what you heard tonight or anything in between. So the public hearing is now reopened.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and members of the audience. The points that you have in your package, like you said, the FAR concerns and the setbacks, things like that they are worthy causes for some situations. My concern that I've always had is that when we started this project, the rules that we worked with were the ordinances that you put in place for us. And so they just didn't have any rear yard setbacks. That's your standards. That's just not mine. That's your standards. And all the recent developments that you have in your package, that they're on page 38, 39, and 40. The most relevant of those are the Brandywine development and the Lone Hill. They're the closest development to what we have here. They both got rezoned to 7,500 square feet lots from, larger zoning prior, and none of them have any rear yard setbacks. A lot of them have rear yard setbacks way less than what we have. I mean, the report for the Lone Hill project says that it's got 42 and 65-foot rear yard setbacks, but it's all hillside. When you come out your rear door of your house, you only have 10, 15, in some cases 20 feet, but I did the aerial look on it on Google Earth, and you can see it, and it's all hillside off the backside. So to me, that really doesn't count as usable space in the backyard, and it's kind of misconceiving on the setback. When you look at the Brandywine development, they got setbacks that range from 9 feet to 30. It's 9 feet to 35 feet. That's what we have, except for ours we're getting an overlay put on us that mandating us to 15 feet. And we're willing to accept that. We're not happy about it, but we're willing to accept it, and we can modify our plans and make them all work at 15 feet. But it just seems strange that we're the ones having to do this and nobody else did. That's the problem I have. I think everybody should be treated fairly and the same. As far as house sizes, like I'm saying once again, those two developments are the closest to ours. And Brandywine, their single story that they have is 2,732 square feet. Their large two-story is 3,745 square feet. Okay, right now, with the 15-foot setbacks and the layout that we would choose to use for the single story, so you still have a backyard, we're going to be reduced down to about 2,200 to 2,300 square feet. That layout that staff showed, I don't think anybody would ever build and just leave yourself a 15-foot strip in the back. That might be your buildable area that you could technically build on, but nobody would ever do that because everybody wants some backyard. And the single story that we've designed gives a nice sized backyard. We just think it makes more sense to not have the setbacks or the standards that nobody else had, but we're willing to live with them if that's something that what it takes to get an approval. The Lone Hill project, like I said, if you look at their usable backyards, they got 10 to 15 feet. I mean, their hillside goes down the hill, but it's not usable. So it's hard to count that in my eyes. And their smallest home is 3,757 square feet, and their largest home is 3,940 square feet, and they're all 2 stories. No special conditions put on them, no overlay zone, nothing. And to kind of prove my point that they've really built on every ounce of their property is not one of the 18 homes up there has a swimming pool. Well, generally, if you're going to spend that much money for a home, a lot of people would like to have a swimming pool, but they don't have room for one. Our houses, 90% of them all have room for swimming pools. And we think that's a nice feature to be able to have in a new home. The FAR, like I said, every city has one, or let me rephrase that. Some of them have them. The ones that Ms. Williams picked out have them. But every city has an exception to it. Glendora, for example, if you pay for a minor mitigation, you can achieve, instead of it being, you can get another 15% on top of what they allow you to for. So you can have 3,419 square foot of living space in their in their homes in Glendora. Claremont, if you do a detached garage, you can have up to a 700 square foot detached garage, and the detached garage is only got to be 6 feet away from the home, and you can still connect it with a roof and enclose the sides. It's called an enclosed breezeway. If you do that, they allow 3,825 square feet on a 7,500 square foot lot. West Covina, with a conditional use permit, you can do 4,000 square feet. Temple City didn't get back to me on their stuff. But with a 3-car garage, which we do have, instead of the 2-car that staff shows on there, it gets it up to 3,500 to 3,700 square feet. So all the other cities, they do have some form of an FAR, except for Laverne. But the homes that we're designing, if you put a setback requirement on it, it's the same thing. The FAR is kind of confusing, I think, for everybody to understand a little bit. And the property that we have, the project that we have in front of you is what we want to build. We're not trying to do anything different. We're not trying to ask for this and slide something else in there. In all honesty, if you put this FAR on here and do things the way it is, we really could change it. We could detach the garage, put it 5 feet from the property line, and that would be legal. But we're not trying to do that. We're trying to build the project that we got in front of you. And so I would just hope that, we've spent 4 years working on this project. It's a nice project. It's smaller than the last 2 that you guys have approved, square footage wise. It's got larger rear setbacks than all the rest of them you've approved. And it's going to improve property values. It's going to do a lot of benefits for the city. And we just hope that you can give it some positive consideration. That's all. As far as John had mentioned about street trees and things like that, our original plan showed a smaller street. That's not a deal breaker on our books to make a smaller street and give up parking on one side or something like that if that's what you preferred. But the configuration of that lot just happens to be narrow and kind of long. It's not a square property. So you really do give up a couple of lots by going the full 56 feet. And Larry was generous enough to allow us to go to 50 feet, and it made the project work out. It really did. The zoning is 7,500 square feet. Yeah, ours are real close to it. And there's only a few of them that are at 8,000 feet or a little over. But the zoning we're asking for is 7,500 square feet. As long as you meet 7,500 square feet, you're in compliance. And so we're in compliance. The rain gardens, we think that's a better way of doing complying with LID. For one, you get to see if they're working. You get to see if you put some underground device and it fills up, you have no idea if it's working anymore or not. If it bubbles over and it's too hard to maintain, you can't even tell if you're maintaining it. Nobody's going to crawl. It's like crawling in a septic system. No one's going to crawl in that tank to find out if it's working or not working. So what we got proposed is normal landscaping like every other home would like to have. It's just a depressed area, like in the packet I gave you 2 weeks ago. It's a depressed area that gathers the rain in one spot until it can percolate into the ground, as needed. It's way more affordable. You can see if it's working or not. And to be honest with you, you can tell, if they're on the plans and it's there, your staff always knows if it's been messed with or not. They can always have a visual inspection to see if it's still in place. The law gives you the applicant the opportunity to produce whatever method they choose, as long as they're in compliant. And I know the city has to agree with it, but your city already has agreed with it. And they've approved the same plan, 4 or 5 months ago on a home. So I know it's something that's just not been banned from the city. I just think that the 15-foot setback, we meet those requirements anyhow. Our average setback right now is right at 24 feet. Some are as far as 34 and a half feet, and our smallest one was 12 feet. But we're willing to modify our plans and change them to make sure that the minimum is 15 feet. We would like to have that single story at 12 feet, just so we could maintain a little bit bigger home and still give it some backyard. But that's your guys' call on that. We'll live with it either way. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Begin. Anybody else from your team want to speak tonight?
If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Well, I think one of staff's, you can answer a question on, it might be good to answer about the rain gardens or the rock gardens. One of staff's concerns, because I think there's a couple that are in the backyard. I don't know how many are in the backyard, do you recall?
There would be 5 on the the south side of the track. And one of the reasons for that is it really does, because everything drains, southwest, and that'll help. It'll help with the grading, because instead of all the water draining to the front of the property or all the water draining to the back of the property, we've split the grade in the middle. So only a little bit goes in the backyard, and the majority of it goes to the front yard. So the rain or rock garden design in the backyard is very small anyhow. It's the size of a desk or something like that is all it would take to get it done.
Now, how does a homeowner know that that's not just some rocks and stuff that with plants that 3 years from now have all died, and he wants to level it off and put a patio or build a pool or something like that?
Well, one, it would be deeded on a deed restriction on the property. 2, we would give them a plan, and we state on the plan that this is what's been approved by the city in the front yard, in the rear yard, as your drainage devices. These drainage devices are, with a summary on it, that they're extremely important, and that you void your warranty, and you're creating liability for yourself if you affect these and they don't work, and now it affects somebody else's property downstream or side stream. So the homeowner is taking a risk. And I'm not saying that if he wanted to do something back there isn't a method for doing it. There's probably, if he wanted to put an underground tank system in, or if he wanted to put a drainage system in that got it back out to the front or something like that, there is other ways of doing that. So he's not committed to this. This is just a method of doing it that tends to work with the grading, works with the natural lay of the land, and we think it's attractive and it works. We've given you pictures on the other ones on the last packet, and I don't know if you guys think they're attractive or not, but we think they're okay.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else? You'll have another chance after everybody.
Sure.
Or you have a question? Yeah,
But
go ahead.
once again, please explain to me what benefit on that single-story home 12 feet versus 15 gives to you. Because Larry explained maybe there's an extenuation on one side of the house or something like that, the way what benefit other than...
If you looked at the floor plan that we had laid out, that I had given you guys in your packet, and we do have it in a PowerPoint up here if you'd like to see it, it just allows us to concentrate the house on a portion of the property and allow some backyard for the single story. If you mandate the 15 feet, it's gonna make the house smaller, for one, or we're gonna stretch the house out and give less outdoor space for the single story home, which will just make it less attractive, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Began, I just have a question. The zoning currently is SF 16,000, so council's considering that zone change. Let's say hypothetically, council did not come to some sort of consensus tonight. Would you plan on coming back with that existing lot size and proposing, say, 6 larger homes on those properties?
If we do have if that's our next option. I mean, the option that I was told, at least that's how I understood it when I had our meeting with Larry, is that if we don't do a zone change, that an overlay zone is not something that happens on a zone change. So if we kept the existing zone, we would ask for a lot split, and we have a plan, you know, it's a rough plan, but we do have a plan laid out for that provides for 6 homes that are between 16 or 18 and 20,000 square foot lots, with a private street and a gate, and we would just build 6 large homes there, you know, what this SF 16,000 square foot zoning would allow. And we think that's an option too. It's a riskier option, and it will not fit in with the neighborhood as well, but that's what the current zoning is. So we're not left with very much to work with.
What's your definition of larger home?
Over 6,000 or 7,000 feet.
What would the FAR be on a lot size of SF 16,000?
There wouldn't be an FAR because there's no overlay zone, so it would be governed by the 35% lot coverage. And in theory, you could do, you know, a full 2-story equal to the 35%. And I think I calculated it at 16,000 square feet. In theory, you could build an 11,000 square foot house.
Wow.
But you have to get it approved too.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
Obviously.
and it has to be marketable.
Right.
You know, and I think even John will tell you, he probably is not planning on building and selling a 10,000 square foot house there, although he might be legally allowed to build something that way. And for those of you that have been at design review, I mean, you don't always get the maximum. You know, you get something that's appropriate, and sometimes the sizes get tweaked a little bit. Sometimes they don't. So there's still a design process that, you know, that evaluates the design. But in theory, you could, you know, probably build 10 or 11,000 square feet, 2-story, full layout on a 16,000 square foot lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
With a 0 setback, if you wanted to. I mean, no, we wouldn't do that, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is
Again, yeah, but try to get it approved.
I agree.
Okay? And nobody's gonna build it that way either.
No, they wouldn't.
Okay.
Any other question?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Very much. All right, now we're going to hear from anybody in the audience who wants to speak on the matter, whether, just you come on forward. We like to hear your name and address and have you write it down, but you're not legally required to do that, so you can be.
Okay, I told you guys before I'm really not okay with speaking, and I really want to show respect by taking my hat off, but it's not pretty under here, so we'll skip that. I really wish this was school where he could say something and I could raise my hand and say how I felt because I can't remember everything. I tried to look at some stuff. I'm sorry, my name is Jill and I'm at 342 Moore Lane, and I know that was the instruction to begin with, but anyway. I tried to look at everything that was talked about last time we were here, and I just made some notes on my phone, and I know it isn't going to be in line with, it's not going to be in a row, if that makes sense, but is it okay if I just read from my phone real quick?
Of course.
Everybody okay? Okay, so you guys talked about the street trees. Glasses, can't see. Everybody talked about the street trees, requiring street trees and sidewalks or parkways. Private front yard trees do not have the same visual enhancement to street and don't shade sidewalks as well. And there's no plans on the website for anybody to actually look at, so they have to come here. Okay, hold on. Overlay Zone 2, condition of approval, number 7. It's very subjective on aesthetics to Moore Lane. Does that make sense? Not to me. Condition of approval for track map number 21, TTM 1601. It outlines private trees, but probably in the front yard at, you guys know what this means, I don't. DPRB, how high is the second window? I'm right across the street from where these are gonna be, and all those they're gonna be looking down in my yard. There's gonna be no privacy whatsoever. And I do have a problem with that. The 12 and 15-foot rear yards. So my property, I've got a 20-foot easement that the city can just take if you guys want to make it a through street. We knew that when we bought it. And then there's another 20-foot easement from the front of my house to the street. So if I ever do want to build, I'm losing 40 feet. That's 40 feet. These guys are, I'm not trying to take away from you guys making money. I'm really not. But why does everybody have to everything has to be so close? The reason why my mom and I bought here is because where we bought, the lots were big, and there was space, and there was privacy, and you couldn't hear your neighbor's radio, and you didn't have people looking in your yard. You could, walk around naked without people looking in your windows. If you guys are gonna change the 16,000 down to 75, you need to include the other side, because if this happens, and yes, I'm making this about me, but if you guys approve this, I will be the last lot that's historical. Can't do much to my house because I don't have the money. And it's historical. I can't even change the windows, which that house leaks like a sieve. It costs so much money. My house was built in 1927. I've got a 20,000 square foot lot. I don't intend on building more. When my mom was alive, yes, we had plans, but none of it would have been approved. But at least allow me to be able to have a resale value. If you're gonna change all that, change mine too. If you're going to tear down those historical homes, make mine not historical either. Because it's not, he's talking about being fair, be fair. I'm not trying to take away from what they're trying to build or make. I don't wanna look at 2 stories, really don't. I've enjoyed my privacy for the last 8 years. It's probably been the best 8 years that I've had in a really long time, because I do feel safe and secure, because I'm on a dead end. Nobody can look in. Nobody can get in because I have a gate that is remote control. You jump my fence, that's your problem. But I feel safe there. And now that there's gonna be all these homes across the street, I'm not gonna be so safe. And yes, there are 2 stories around me, but they're far away. And make it 9,000 square feet. Make it 1 story. You said you maybe don't have a problem making 1 story, but if you guys come down 3rd, and yes, it'll be offset, but you're gonna have these big 2-story homes. And when you come down any of those streets, you're not seeing that. San Dimas is quiet and quaint and friendly and safe, and not that 2 stories isn't gonna make it safe, but it's gonna be, we mentioned Temple City last time. I've had a business in Temple City for 20 years. Can't afford to rebuild my house, but I've had a business for 20 years. They're trying to change it, but they're still building these 2-story monstrosities. We don't want to look at that, and it's sad, but none of my direct neighbors are here tonight because they're so tired of fighting. One neighbor in particular, her husband's a sheriff, she's been fighting for 20 years for our street. She's just done. And we actually got in an argument because she didn't want to stand up. And she's all, well, nobody cares. There's abandoned cars across the street. There's yards that are dead. Okay, my yard's the only one that's dead because I can't afford to water it. It's a big lawn. It's sad to see the orchard go. It really is. It hasn't had any water. Neither is my place, for that matter. I just don't want to see. We want to live in the city, but why do we have to be right on top of each other? And if you guys allow them to build these 2 houses, and I'm sorry, but if you guys let them build these 2 stories, we're going to be right on top of each other. And I've got a 40-foot easement on one side. and around the rest, and they're gonna have like nothing? There was a lady last week that said that she was looking forward to purchasing one of these homes. When my mom and I bought here, she was looking to retire. She wasn't looking at stairs. They're gonna be building 2 stories. Who wants to retire and be 90 and have to go upstairs? I mean, that's just, when you turn 90, do you wanna go upstairs? Or you're gonna have to, and by the time you turn 90, those little lifts that go up the stairs that you sit on and roll up, they're gonna be expensive, okay? So that's my input, and I know I'm only one, and I did this last time, I didn't sign in till I was done, I apologize. I just get so it's hard for me to express my feelings because I get very emotional, but I appreciate you guys listening, and I don't plan on leaving this town anytime soon, and it was really sad when you guys took out all the sidewalks in downtown, just saying. And that's it for me. You probably think I'm crazy.
Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate them, and
I'm not trying to take away from
you can come and see us anytime.
breathe. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Gil Gonzalez, resident of San Dimas. I'm looking to, I guess, switch one person's opinion. Last time it was 2-2, and we've got the same situation, so we got to go 3-1. I'm not in favor of the project because I think that it doesn't lend to the character of the community or the neighborhood. Bottom line. I don't care about money, and as a matter of fact, you guys are boring me to death with all these details. Unbelievable. And I think we need to look at the process that got us to this situation. Someone in this staff or on that council, on that dais, accepted a letter from this gentleman saying, we will have a study session. We had a study session. I can't even imagine the tens or hundreds of hours that we have paid our employees to review this project. And here we are talking about stupid things. I don't think, and I say stupid because they're trying to pass on responsibilities as the developer to the homeowner. What are you going to do when Eric says, hey, this guy tore out this retention basin or this filtering system, and he built the patio, and now he's in trouble with the county? Vote no. Unanimous, no. We have to send the message to all developers: we don't care about your money. We care about our city. And there seems to be a big disconnect from the council and the people. We have people sitting that live right by here and they don't want it. Where are these people that want it tonight? They didn't get paid for it to come tonight or something? I don't know. But you guys are making a big mistake by approving this because you're sending a signal. Please vote no, 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, Council and staff. Chris Rush, 622 North Smead Way, here, local resident. I live about 3.5 blocks away from the proposed topic tonight. I'm going to address 3 things that I'm concerned about with this development. I think inevitably and ultimately, yes, this property will be developed due to the fact that the citrus industry, whether marketing or irrigation, it's not going to be maintained. So there will be homes. My first one is the concern about habitat. There's some great oak trees and other stuff that's around there. We have owls and other birds of prey that live in that area. Relocation of the oak trees, etc. I know that's doable, but we need to keep some of them there. In fact, why not all of them? The builder, the applicant, let's design that homes around that. Let's keep some of these trees for habitat and also the aesthetics of the city. My other thing is the 2-story process. If they're going to be built, no 2-story. Let's keep them single-story. The view of the city here is great. I love San Dimas. I've been here forever. No 2-story. Keep it single-story. And the third part is please consider any applications or requests for local residents in that area for rezoning. There's all the details, so we'll call rezoning. Those are my 3 topics. No 2-story or above. Keep it single-story because it's probably going to eventually get developed. But no 2-story. Keep it single. keep the trees for habitat and aesthetics, and consider any rezoning issues. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wants to talk on this subject?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and the audience. My name is Alex Gonzalez. I live at 1324 Birchdale Street here in San Dimas. I've lived here for 8 years. I've lived in surrounding areas, Glendora for another 8 to 12 years, in other areas like Azusa and Diamond Bar and El Monte and Pico Rivera, and also La Crescenta. I am familiar with some of the other cities that they talked about, Temple City and the things that are going on over there. My concerns are 3, like some of the people that spoke earlier. The first one has to do with the tree removals. You talked about oak trees, and I don't know if these are the California oak trees that you're talking about. At one time, I thought they were a protected species, and you really couldn't do anything with oak trees, moving them. And so if they are being removed, I want to know what's happening with them, where they're going, are they going to be replanted, that sort of thing. Second thing for me was the, I guess it's called retention basins for the rainwater. The developer said that every home that was being built, you could build a swimming pool in the backyard. Well, if you have a retention basin, how does that affect the area where a homeowner would want to build a swimming pool? That would be my question to the builder. I think it's something you need to ask the builder. And the third thing was about the 2-story homes. I would be in agreement with the gentleman that just spoke, no 2-story homes. I live in an area where there are some 2-story homes at the end of my block. To me, they're very unsightly. I know the Lone Hill project, I've been up there, I've been in open houses out there, I was looking to buy some property up there. It's in an area all by itself on top of a hill, it doesn't seem to bother anybody, really. But you put it in a nice neighborhood like here, especially downtown San Dimas, where you got old downtown, 4th Street, 5th Street, 2nd Street, 1st Street, old homes since, 1920, 1930s, whatever. I think it takes away from the area. I think it takes away from the beauty of San Dimas. I just talked to a neighbor of mine today on the way home from the airport. We seem to have the same sentiment that San Dimas is a nice, small, local town with good folk living in it, hard-working folk, and we basically want to just keep it that way. We don't want it to look like some of the other cities that have expanded. And anyway, that's my talk for tonight. Thank you.
Sure, go up and ask one more question.
The area in the backyard that was gonna be water drainage, the thing that was gonna be pretty, they offered to give us on Moore Lane the other half of the property. So, the other half of the street. So it'd be a total private street up to their back wall or decorative fence, whatever it was gonna be. They're gonna have that thing in the back for the drainage. Who's not to say in 5 years that it doesn't eat away the entire curb and gutter that I'm now responsible for? That's a question. And if I agree to accept that free land, who's gonna pay for the property transfer? Do my property taxes increase? That all comes into play. But the biggest thing is, what if in 5, 10 years, water erosion takes out that curb and gutter? I've gotta pay for it. So if that can be taken into consideration, that'd be great.
The applicant will have another chance to speak at the end, and maybe that's something he wants to elaborate on.
Thank you very much, sorry.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak for or against the project in the audience? I don't see anybody, so Mr. Begin, do you want to say a few closing words?
I would. Could I get the PowerPoint presentation? I need to show, because I think there's some miscommunication of how close the homes are to other people. If we could bring the track map up.
Do you want the controls, John, or how far down is it?
If you don't mind. Okay, what makes you go? It's this way, right?
If you want to
Okay.
go, you got full screen, great.
Just to answer some of the questions, these are the 2 stories in your area. Okay, there's our site, like I said, our site is right here, the blue site right here. the area of San Dimas is surrounded with 2 stories, okay? We're not the only 2 stories in the whole town. The ordinance allows 2 stories. If you guys didn't want 2 stories, change the ordinance. Change the ordinance before we put in our application. Then we would have known what we were getting ourselves into. So changing the rules midstream kind of doesn't seem right. And changing it for us and not changing it for anybody else in your town, that's really not right. 2, let me get to the track map here real quick. Oops. Okay, these homes, Joanne lives in this particular house right here. I'm sorry, this one right here, okay? To this home right here, the backyard of her house, we got 80 to 100 feet. I mean, you're not gonna find a house in your whole town that has that much privacy from one person's house to the next. I mean, well, you're not gonna find any in the 7500 zoning, the SF 7500 zoning in your town that has this much distance in between them. Every one of these houses right here, from Moore Lane to the back here, is 80 to 100 feet. You got 40 feet of right-of-way street, we got 25 feet of backyard, and they got 20 feet of front yard setback. So you got 85, 90 feet.
What's the yellow on that?
The yellow happened to be where our rain gardens were proposed, and the only reason why we showed those is because this was your previous city-approved design on 11/14/2017. You've already approved this design once, so we just assume that's what you guys wanted. Is that a deal breaker for our project? No, but we just think they're attractive, and if you don't like them, then hey, we would go along with something else. That's not a deal breaker for us. It's just that you approved it for somebody else already, and you got one in the front. You got a large one in their front yard that's just way larger than we have, and you also have one in their rear yard. So you already approve front and rear yard rain gardens. So that was the concept of that right there, as far as distance in between houses. And the LID. As far as oak trees and birds of prey and all that kind of stuff, that was the whole purpose of getting charged $35,000 for an initial study, an environmental study that requires you to have a biologist on the site during the time of grading to see if there's any birds of prey or anything like that in their nesting seasons or anything like that. And if there is, you can't cut the trees down. You have to wait. There's the whole book's an inch thick of everything that you have to comply to. As far as oak trees, they're old. They don't relocate and live. They got a 10% chance at best if they ever do live. And these trees are overgrown for most of the lots, even if you could move them somewhere. They're large, they wouldn't live, and good designing is putting the trees around the track where they're gonna live and stay. Trying to build something around existing trees that have been there for a long time it's gonna create a hodgepodge of either wall designs, house designs. There's no consistency to anything. So nobody builds that way. You save the ones that you can if they work out in your plan, and it works out per the city of San Dimas' tree ordinance plan that you can absolutely guarantee that you can save them, then you do that. But trees, you're not supposed to grade anywhere near the drip lines. You're not supposed to grade low or high or pour concrete over them or do any of that kind of stuff. So it's a sensitive thing, and if you take that into consideration on the whole site, there's nothing to work with left. So that's the reason why trees get cut down and they get replanted, because they grow back. And as far as other things like, it's real easy for people to come up here and state that, you know, I don't want two-story homes, or I don't want this, I don't want that, because their house is already there. That's called a NIMBY, not in my backyard. They love to beat up on people that want to make a living, that want to create a nice project, and they love to move into new homes and things like that too. But if you don't have a financial stake in some of these things, and you're abiding by all the rules of the city, it just doesn't seem right that you know, your project doesn't get approved. You've already approved projects exactly the same, and then, you know, to restrict this one to death, it just doesn't seem fair. I agree with Joanne. I think that her home should be put on the I'm sorry, Jill, should be put in the zone change also. San Dimas puts homes on the historical list, and they're not necessarily historical. They're just old. And when you look up the definition of a historical home, it has to meet about 6 qualifications. 1, it has to be built before a certain time. 2, it has to be in its original state and in good condition. 3, it has to have a significant value for a reason, like they only made a few of them, or a famous person lived there. San Dimas doesn't necessarily do that. If it's just old, it's automatically on the list. Now you got to go through a real process to get it off the list, or in order to tear it down. I mean, we had to go through, spend lots of money on all these things, on these 2 houses that we have, and they're nowhere near significant historical. One of them would already had a demolition permit, but yet we still had to go through the process, like if it never had one, like it never existed. And the house has been red tagged to where you could never move into it, lease it, or do anything in it for 8, 10 years, maybe longer, 15 years. So I think she's got a great point on the historical side of things, that you guys put these conditions on there, and allow her to be part of the zone change process too. So someday down the road, if she would like to sell or develop or something like that, her property's worth something also, because the homes in that area right there, most of them, they don't have 16,000-foot lots to start with. They were never originally zoned 16,000 feet. And you all know the process, and the reason why they got changed to 16,000 feet had nothing to do with, you know, why it's there. It's politics and other things that are not nice to mention. So I think that's the answers that I have for the people that are here, that there is a process. Everybody's home that got built had trees on it at one time. It was everybody's home had orchards or orange groves or everything in this area. Everything was that way at one time. But it's okay for theirs to get torn down, so they got a place to live, but it's not okay for somebody else. That's just not right. And I hope you guys will vote in favor of the project, that's all.
All right, thank you, John. Typically, we have the applicant have the last word. Do you have a brief comment? John's going to get to answer to that comment.
I have a comment about the oak trees. I used to work at Pomona College in Claremont, where you have lots of oak trees, California oaks. And from time to time, we have to move them. We remove them, box them up, and move them to another location on the school site. And this happens a lot of times, not just once. And so I would challenge him to find a way to, if he's not cutting down trees, to remove them and replant them somewhere else. My understanding is they are a protected species by the state of California. I think you need to research that before he cuts any trees down. You can go ahead and answer to that, John.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Once again,
maybe I can help with asking a question. Is there, and I was going to ask staff this, but is there a mitigation plan? Because typically when you remove some trees, you are required to do something.
A replacement
plan. To make up for it, mitigation. So whether that's good enough or not, that's another story, but I just want to hear what the mitigation plan is.
Well, we have a replacement plan. Our replacement plan is to replace each significant tree with with one new significant tree per front yard of each home. If you'd like one in the backyard also, we don't have a problem with that too.
You say significant, does that mean another oak tree, or is there a set of choices they get? Or
We're
what does that
open.
mean?
You know, that's not a deal breaker on our part. That's something that, if that's what you guys want to death, I mean, we're gonna plant some trees on our landscape plan anyhow. If you want them to be a duplicate replacement oak tree, we could do that. They take a long time to grow, and you won't see the benefit of it in our lifetime. If you use something else, you do see the benefit. Something a little faster grows, something that maintains a smaller frame, that's more designed for the size of homes and the size of lots that we're trying to produce. I mean, I'm pretty sure most 7,500 square foot lots don't have that many 100-year-old oak trees and trees that have tree trunks on them that are 5 foot in diameter. We're trying to save the ones that we can, but relocating an oak tree, the survival chances is almost nil. The cost to do it, the cost to put it somewhere to take it in the first place. I mean, a lot of these lots, they just don't have the physical space to accept a tree that big.
Thank you. We're going to close the public hearing now, and that closes the public hearing and bring it back to the City Council for discussion and possible action. Larry?
I'd just like to clarify on the tree issue. First of all, oak trees are not a protected species in the state of California. There are 0 state regulations relative to oak trees. Every regulation preserving oak trees or any other tree is based upon whatever local ordinances are adopted. The exception is that there are a few trees, black walnuts and some others under certain circumstances that are protected by the state, but oak trees are not one of those trees. The environmental document does discuss oak trees, and should you adopt it, has general mitigation measures that essentially will say that any mature trees removed shall be governed by the tree removal permit and the provisions of the San Dimas Municipal Code. It does not have a specific mitigation in the environmental document because we're relying on our existing ordinance. What our existing ordinance says is that there is a 2-to-1 replacement requirement for mature trees. So the 30-odd trees that qualify as mature trees under the tree removal permit will, as part of the tree removal, have some sort of mitigation. The Development Plan Review Board makes that decision. It has the ability to adjust the ratio depending upon the circumstances, the size, and the quality and condition of the trees. Most cases, we do a 2-to-1 replacement. We may or may not replace it with the same species depending upon the conditions. We do have the ability to reduce the ratio and use alternate trees, and we will carefully consider that when the board evaluates the tree removal permit. And I think if anything, the staff has probably been more criticized for being tough on tree removal than easy on it, so.
Council talks about this. I had a clarifying question about floor area ratio in nearby cities for Jennifer. So we have the survey. The applicant mentioned that 2 or 3 of those cities have a way of going above the size that are limited by the floor area ratio. Have you heard of that, or do you know about that?
From what I found in Glendora's website and their municipal code, and I cited the code section I pulled the information from, this is on page 35, it's Exhibit B, and it's the survey in the table there. Glendora's permits a 35% floor area ratio, not including a 400 square foot attached garage. So that would result in 2625 square feet max, or 3,025 including the garage allowance. I did not see anything in the code beyond that in that section that referenced a deviation. I can certainly research that further. And I also spoke with one of the planners on the phone, and that was my understanding based on my conversation with them. As far as the Claremont section, which is the next item down, the code section is also referenced, and it permits a maximum floor area of 2,000 square feet plus 15% of the square footage of the net lot area. And so when you calculate that out, that was resulting in 3,125 square foot maximum. And it's true that that included the attached garage, carport, and covered patio. I actually have all the code sections that I pulled. I didn't include them in the staff report, but it does, I can expand if you'd like.
I think that's sufficient unless another council member wants to hear more about it.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it does specify that that's for attached structures for Claremont.
Okay. All right, discussion among the city council. I have something about trees, but I don't know if anybody wants to. I don't know if you could go back to that 6th Street graphic. I wanted to just make a suggestion. And while you're bringing that up, I think street trees are extremely important. And I think we should find a way to get the street trees on this project, especially since the applicant seems to be willing to do it. And just for everybody's benefit, I'll repeat what I've said a number of times. Street trees have been shown to raise property values, as a matter of fact. A canopy of street trees has been shown to lower the ambient temperature of the neighborhood or that area up to 10 degrees from surrounding streets without trees. And it helps preserve the pavement a little bit longer. So not only, and that's just those benefits you might be able to, latch onto that are tangible. There's a subjective benefit, of course, of just seeing those trees, and they just always look nice. I'm looking at this drawing, and I'm just going to ask everybody to imagine if we start on the left-hand side and we've got a 5-foot setback, and I know you. And so this is off the top of my head, but and we'd have to work through it. But let's say you've got a 5-foot setback sidewalk, and I know you said there had to be utilities behind that, but let's say there's 5. Let's say you go with 4-foot parkway, maybe 3 inches or so less, so you're up to 9 feet. Then we go with a street that's 36 feet wide. I would say that we probably don't need parking on both sides, but let's say we go with staff's 36 feet. So we're up to 45 feet. On the other side of the street, and maybe that street can be 35 feet instead of 36. Let's just give it an extra foot. On the other side of the street, forget the sidewalk. The right-of-way would include a parkway tree. So there are, I was going to say zillions, but lots of houses in San Dimas, and I grew up on one, where and on 3rd Street where there's no sidewalks, where part of their front yard is actually city property, right? And we've got trees planted on 3rd Street where there is no sidewalk. And they're in the public right-of-way. They're city trees. They go with our palette. And so I was wondering, I'd like to put this into the overlay zone so it's a requirement to have street trees on this street. I think it's extremely important. And that's just up for discussion with the council.
On both sides.
Street trees on both sides, sidewalk on one.
And Larry, is that possible on a 7,500 square foot lot for him to build the house that he wants?
It's all within the 50-foot right-of-way, so it doesn't change the lot layout at all.
You want parkway trees on both sides, but sidewalk only on one.
Sidewalk and separate, and the tree first and then the sidewalk, because you really want them close to the street, especially if you're going to go with 36 feet. You want them close to the street so they can grow and start making a canopy. That's a thought, and so that's one thing that I would propose we put in the overlay zone. And it's an idea, it may need to be discussed, you may need to look at the street layout. I'm just proposing that as a general concept that to require street trees near the curb.
I don't think I have any objection to what you're asking, but I will not approve myself a street smaller than 36 feet. That's the bottom line. 36 foot, and you guys figure out what you want to do, how much concrete you want to replace over the years. I don't really care, but the street needs to be 36 feet, and there should be parking on both sides of the street. Because you have people coming and going, and this guy parks in front of my house, and they go over here, you can't park. You need parking on both sides of the street.
Can you have parking on both sides of the street and have it 36 feet?
At 36 feet, yes.
Yes, that's no problem.
Yeah, that is the intention, and that is our recommendation, is that under no circumstance do we go below 36 feet. The question is, what do you do with the rest? Okay, because the right-of-way is typically 50 feet. So that essentially gives you 7 additional feet behind the curb. And we believe the minimum sidewalk width should be 5. I think it's...
I can see the problem.
Yeah. I think it's arguable as to whether or not you want sidewalk on both sides. This is a pretty pedestrian-oriented area, and we do certainly have some areas, I think in Villa Verde, where we may have sidewalks on only one side. But I think this is pretty pedestrian-oriented, and it would be more desirable to have it on both sides, but one option would be to only have it on one side, and then we'd have to decide, probably better to have it on the north than the south, but, you know, we'd have to think that through. But then that leaves you 2 additional feet. Now, we need 2 additional feet for utilities, you know, power, water, et cetera. They need 2 feet. And the preference is that they be within the right-of-way. And you don't want to put a tree that's going to have its roots grow and ultimately interfere with the utility underground work. Okay?
You know, another thing.
So that means if you want a parkway tree, you have to put it behind the utility easement. So is there a way to do that? Yes, you could require a planting easement for street tree purposes, and then the city could maintain that tree, you know, in the future, rather than have it be a private tree, which is what we initially suggested. Or you could go to our normal right-of-way of 60 feet, but then you're going to have to change the subdivision design and reduce the number of lots because there's no flexibility because the lots are all at the minimum. So if you want a parkway tree, then the only way to achieve it without substantially altering the plan would be to require a planting easement for street tree purposes behind the utility easement.
Okay.
And you know, the other issue is to sidewalk on one side of the street. We kind of go against what we talk about with walkability and people pushing. Next thing you know, we push these people out into the street.
If you're going to have the parkway tree in an easement, you might as well have it on both sides and have the sidewalk. You're not achieving anything different. You're maybe moving the tree 5 feet closer. If you plant the right tree, it doesn't really matter. You know, any tree you plant, you're probably going to have to plant like we did downtown. You're probably going to have to plant them with barriers so the barriers don't interfere with utilities. You know, and then you'll have to decide what the species of tree is. 3rd Street, I think, was a Chinese flame. We'd probably continue the 3rd Street palette if you required parkway trees.
Okay.
And he would still be able to do his development the way he wants to do it.
If we required a planting easement for the street tree.
And those are adjacent to the curb trees you're talking about?
No, the trees would be behind.
Yeah. No, I'm talking, so what I'm talking about, just to be
You want
clear,
the trees adjacent to the curb.
Parkway trees, the streets look
Then-
better with
Then
parkway.
the only way to do that is to curve the sidewalk around the trees, and then you have an easement for the sidewalk.
Yep. Okay, that's.
And another question, Larry, please explain to me this This gardens, what other issue is the garden versus what do we, if we say no on the gardens, what do we do?
Okay, we didn't say 100% no on rock gardens. We kind of said 90% no. So we're open to looking at a design that may include a rock garden. The problem with rock gardens is this. If they're in the backyard, out of sight, out of mind, we have an obligation, I think, every 2 years for residential to inspect and verify. I think residential, we have a biannual obligation to verify compliance with imposed LID requirements and report to the Regional Water Quality Control Board that there is continuing compliance. Out of sight, out of mind, easy to change. I don't care if it's a recorded covenant. I don't care if everybody gets the site plan 5 years from now, 3 owners later, nobody's gonna know about that except us, and then it'll become an enforcement issue to try to enforce the requirement. Because it's real easy to make yard changes like that and, you know, without getting any kind of an approval and then dealing with the consequences after the fact. So the city engineer, and the city engineer in more cities than ours, believes that we should minimize the use of rock gardens, that they should, if allowed, they should only be in exposed view locations so that they're able to be inspected and verified on a routine and regular basis. But we prefer underground chambers. We did underground chambers in Brandywine, so every house has an underground chamber that collects the water, does ultimate, I think some of it percolates, but it's got the ability to go to the storm drain. But you may also remember in Brandywine, we also have a large retention basin, you know, at the west end of the project that collects water from the project, and so that's an addition. In this case, that would require more land area and would conceivably affect the number of lots if you created a mutual retention basin. Plus, there's no homeowners association, so those are harder to maintain. The example that was given of where we did approve rock gardens is on a street without curb and gutter and a street without storm drain. So there aren't very many places to put the water except to circulate, you know, except to percolate. You know, plus you have to have the right soils conditions, and I don't know if we probably have the soils report. I can't tell you off the top of my head whether this is good for percolation or not. We would suggest that you leave the condition exactly the way it's written, including the word generally, which means he can make an argument. It'll be the city engineer's final decision. It's a technical matter, and we would prefer that you leave it a technical matter.
What's the condition number?
It's on page 20, 22, is that, no. Page 22,
Page 22.
condition
31.
And when these objections were raised, originally the second sentence read, rain gardens or any type of above ground treatment will not be acceptable. Okay, so we added the word generally, and so his engineer doesn't have to exclude them, but he's going to have to make an argument that our engineer has to accept and approve. And it's not likely that we're going to have extensive rain gardens on this property. There's likely to be if there are rain gardens, they'll probably be in addition to underground chambers. A subdivision is different than an infill lot on Oakway. You know, and they're probably lucky that we don't want a detention basin, you know, to get the whole project and take a lot away.
So what's the option then? What do you, if at the subdivision we have this retention basin, okay, and this water's gonna go somewhere,
We're going to deal with it. What the detention basin primarily deals with is the water coming from the street. And so we'll have to figure out as part of the design, you know, how to handle the street water. The underground chambers and/or limited rock gardens on site will capture all of the drainage from the property itself. And then we'll have to figure out some way to address, you know, the water that's generated by the street.
So you're saying there could be some limited rock gardens?
Limited. I want to emphasize limited. There's probably going to be a mix of underground chambers and maybe some limited rock gardens. And if they're approved, they'll probably only be in the front yard.
You're saying that this is a decision best left to staff instead of the city council?
Right.
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
I
All right.
agree.
I
don't
agree.
really understand.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Exactly. Does anybody want to talk about floor area ratio and size of the houses? I mean, I will. I'd like to present my thought on that, and we'll see where we go from there. But there was another slide actually that we could bring up. But while it's coming up, you know, last week I referred to the planning staff's report from the June meeting, for the planning commission meeting, the staff's report, and it was kind of buried in there, so it was hard to find. But so I actually asked Jennifer to print out that section and put it on the dais. So that's the other couple pieces of paper. So back in June, when as the applicant has said, at that study session 3.5 years ago, we were given the proposal was, should we allow an applicant to go forward with an application for this lot for a 7,500 square foot zone change? And there are a number of criteria that we had to look at, and this is called generalized criteria and overriding principles. And there's about, I don't know, what, about 10 of these items, or 8. And, you know, I won't go over them again except to mention that compatibility, fitting in, seamless integration, that kind of thing with the surrounding uses that already exist was one of the things we had to say, yes, a development like this on 7,500 square foot lots, if it meets these criteria, would be fine. And so what we're wrestling with right now, in my opinion, is the size and the scope and the scale of the homes that are being proposed on these 3+ acres compatible, and do they fit in with this, what already exists? They don't have to be the same, they don't have to match, they can be a little bit bigger. But I want to talk about floor area ratio and some of the cities that use this as a tool for helping determine how big a house is, because it's really a good tool on the actual size of the building and what it looks like on the lot. There's in the packet, I think there's I think it's actually on the handout there, that colorful chart shows that you know, all of these surrounding houses are under 2,000, maybe 2,500 square feet. Look at these cities who have got floor area ratio and what their maximum size is. If you take the bonus you might get for a garage, and some of the bonuses you see on the chart say, this is really staff's chart with a little bit of extra thrown in, but there's some that have a rear garage bonus. You only get that bonus if the garage can't be seen from the street, you know, unless you're really, really looking around an angle. So there's a couple that are like that. But in Glendora, and these are all on 7,500 square foot lots, the maximum size of everything, this is garage, loggias, patios, balconies, porches, anything that's covered and attached to the main structure, Glendora, 3,025 feet. And I think this is important enough to read off each one of these values. Claremont, 3,125. West Covina, according to staff, 3,375. The rest I all confirmed myself. West Covina, I didn't. Arcadia, 3,375. Temple City, 2,625. This includes the garage and everything. Alhambra uses a 35% that's just everything, 2,625. Monrovia, seeing that mansionization was coming, 2,875. South Pasadena, 3,125. This is anywhere in the, whatever they call their residential zone with a single family and, the lower density lots of 7,500 square feet. And you see over there the effective floor area ratio for the entire structure. You'll see a couple of them are 45% at the high end, Arcadia and West Covina, but most of them are down there in that high 30s, low 40s percentage, and that's for everything. That's our staff suggestion is that we don't count the porches, patios, and garages. What I'm saying is that we need to make this development fit in and be compatible, we need this kind of tool in the overlay zone. And I would suggest, I don't have a number in mind, there's not a magic number, but a floor area ratio that would limit the size of the houses to the 40% range, maybe 42%, something like that. It's not on the slide, but it is in the staff report on page 36, which is the applicant's proposed house sizes. And you'll see total of everything on each of the plans. The total of everything, 3956, 4089, and 4,208 feet. This is way over what's in the neighborhood. It's way over what these, I think, cities that have some farsight in how they're shaping the way the community is developed. And I think we need something like this on this particular piece of property. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, the staff is recommending 45.
They're recommending 45 without porch, balcony, and garage. So in the end, it's like around 52, I believe is what it is. That is just way out of scale. I mean, it's smaller than what is being proposed, actually, but it's not a lot smaller.
I gotta be honest, I mean, based off of the continuation from the last meeting, we don't have this restriction anywhere at this particular time that we've implemented, correct? Yeah,
We don't have an FAR. I will tell you kind of the history of FARs, at least in the San Gabriel Valley, as a zoning mechanism. Most of the cities have probably adopted these standards to address mansionization. So people coming in and either doing large additions on existing lots or doing tear downs and then building large houses that are out of scale to the community. I would say most, maybe not all, because it is it's a standard that is not uncommonly applied. It's one we've talked about. We've had a couple of discussions over the last 10 years about mansionization. I think we've been fairly effective using the design review board process to ensure that we don't have oversized houses. And I think for those of you that have sat on the board from time to time, you'll remember we've had some pretty spirited discussions about the first two-story in an existing neighborhood, about whether or not the sizes were overwhelming, and we've used the design review process effectively enough that we haven't come in and done, an FAR mansionization that we've applied to existing lots. But that's kind of the background as to why some of them have done it and why we haven't gotten to that at this point in time. There are other ways to limit the size. You could just put a cap on it. Maximum size is X. The FAR is kind of a performance, okay? So if your lot's a little bit bigger, you get a little bit more, rather than just a flat cap. Now, one thing you should be aware of, we did give you some information on surrounding projects that we've approved. The Lone Hill project and Brandywine, which I think the applicant said are most similar to his. One of the things you should look at when you look at the lot size, when you look at the house size that those people have built or intend to build in the case of Brandywine, and then you look at the lot size, none of them had, even though the zoning was 7,500, None of them had a single 7,500 square foot lot. Yeah, so you can't compare the house size on a 10,000, you can't compare a 4,000 square foot house on a 10,000 square foot lot to a 4,000 square foot house on a 7,500 square foot lot. They have completely different visual impacts.
But just as a point of clarity, when this project started, at that particular time and to date, we have not applied this to a project yet.
We have not applied this to a project yet. I think it would be fair to say that when the zone change was authorized to go forward by the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council, we did indicate that that was an area of concern, and we did indicate that there might be the need to have overlay zone standards or something of that sort as we moved forward with the project. Now, the applicant universally objected to that at every step of the way, but we were very upfront that we felt that there might be the need to impose these additional standards. But it's your discretion as to whether you want to do it or don't want to do it, or how you might want to limit the house size.
Yeah, I appreciate John's presentation, and I think it's an important dialogue to have. I'm not opposed to exploring it further. To me, it's a little late in the game that this has gotten so far, as others have said. I'm okay with a cap, perhaps, if that's something there's consensus on. But I'd really like a council study session on this to really hash this out, because I think this is, it's, John's trying his best to explain all of it, but it's, frankly, in my mind, it's half-baked. We haven't really gotten, and no offense to you, you did a really good job explaining it. I think staff's done a good job, but we just haven't had a substantive dialogue about it and applying it to projects. I think we should study a policy on it. It didn't exist when this started. I understand there was intentions declared by staff, so that's kind of where I'm at on that particular issue.
When I look at this, the lot coverage of these proposed houses, didn't we? No, sorry. When we talk about lot coverage, about the proposed sizes, what is our standard? 40% or 35%?
For lot coverage, which is the first floor component of property only, it's 35%, and it's almost that, it's been that universally since before I was here.
So every one of these houses, with the exception of 3, which is 0.1% above.
These houses do comply with the lot coverage requirement, except for the 0.1 on a couple of the lots.
Well, I'd be okay with a cap, but I agree. I think we need a lot more discussion on that, on the FAR, so that we all 5, because Kurt would be should understand what we're doing, where there's more explanation.
We should have that discussion. Just keep in mind that the lot coverage is an insufficient tool. Right
sorry,
now,
what was that?
Insufficient tool. It's not a good enough tool, lot coverage, because, and I'll tell you why. Because an applicant can come in here with a good-looking house that is 2 stories, full floors on each story, and that house would be like over 5,000 square feet on a 7,500 square foot lot. That would meet the standards, and we would be told, well, that's what the standards are, that's all I have to do. But that's not really the case. There's all these subjective things that we should be looking at, and that's why staff talked about it being incompatible and not integrated and not wanting to back into standards. We're backing into standards based on what the applicant is proposing. At one time, the staff was very much against sizes of this house, houses of this size. So that's why I'm proposing that we have a more realistic size. These are all still bigger than houses in the neighborhood. They're just not so much out of scale with houses in the neighborhood that they're just going to be dominating the dominating the neighborhood, and I'm not sure if that's really what we want. Again, I mean, maybe we do want that. I'm just saying that I personally think we should have a more reasonable housing size on this property. And the property owner, you know, he doesn't have the entitlements now. His entitlement is to 16,000 square foot lots. So when we create a zone, we could have created a brand new zone. We could have made an SF 8000 for him and put all sorts of standards in that zone. So that's what we're talking about now. What do we want this property to look like? We really have carte blanche for the 7,500. We can make it look any way we want to, and I think it's very reasonable to have street trees and to have, if you want to call it a floor area ratio, a cap of, you know, I think on the way generous side, I'd go with, I'd have to be gritting my teeth, but I'd go with 3,500 square feet, all inclusive. I'm looking at the chart up there, and all of these cities, the highest they've got is 3,375 square feet. So I don't think San Dimas necessarily wants to be on the cutting edge of allowing the biggest houses in the valley.
Well, John, I gotta tell you, I think you're about 2 years or 3 years too late, because we sent this man on a path, okay? I got nothing to, and I could care less if these houses get built or not, to be honest with you. But we sent him on a path 2.5 or 3 years ago, okay? We should have been talking about what you're talking about right now 3 years ago.
Didn't we talk about single stories, and staff
You know,
staff's recommendation is still for 2 or 3 or 4 single stories?
You know, so,
I just think it's important to point out, I mean, you know, I'm indifferent to a degree on the project moving forward, although I think they are nice homes as plotted out. I think in the tally of people that spoke in public comment, there were more that spoke in favor, I think, in total than there were opposed. And, you know, I think the applicant has stepped up with a willingness to compromise on the 15,000 square foot setback and willing to work with what council and staff has put before him since the last hearing. So, you know, I don't know how we move forward. Obviously, I'm not going to make the same motion as last week, or 2 weeks ago, so kind of defer to some of you to come up with a new scheme if there is one.
Well, what the planning commission recommended was 55% maximum floor area. What staff recommends is 45% maximum floor area ratio, right?
Excluding the 400 square feet per garage.
How about patio
I'm sorry.
and porch?
Huh?
How about patio
and
porch?
patios and porches. I think it says loggias. Does it say loggias or does it say patios? I don't remember. There's been some discussion in the past about the 400, meaning we only wanted 2 20 by 20. No, the 400 is just a calculation technique based upon the minimum size for a 2-car garage. It has nothing to do with whatever the ultimate size of the garage is. It's just a calculation technique to get to the maximum. And we got it primarily from the Glendora example as a thought process. You know, the other thing is, even if you set the whatever standard you set, okay, even if you went with the planning commissions, doesn't mean that that's what's going to get approved. That's the maximum. Okay, don't always get the maximum when you go through the approval process. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. You know, so there may be some, you know, some opportunity in the design review process, you know, where they don't get all the way to the maximum. And if you want more information, we can get more information. We can have a study session. I can give you, you know, we can develop some, you know, we can either do some computer-generated, you know, layouts to show how these houses fit on these lots, okay? Or we can get some examples, you know, showing what different floor area ratios actually physically look like when built, if you need more information before you arrive at a standard. The other choice you have is you could just leave the floor area ratio standard completely out, okay, and then we'll deal with it through design review. I mean, that's another option, instead of worrying about the standard, and then if you create a standard later on, and you put it in the SF zone, if he hasn't built his project, then he may be subject to that at that point in time.
So let me stop you there for a minute. So last week, Mark, when I made the motion to exclude, or 2 weeks ago, to exclude the FAR restrictions, it was then said that the two ordinances were interdependent upon each other with that. Is that still the case here, or would the exclusion create an issue?
Well, just to clarify, I believe your motion at the last meeting was to exclude the development overlay zone completely.
I actually try to
strike
work
all
that
the
3 different
development.
ways.
Well, I know, but this issue came up when there was a motion to not have a development overlay at all. What was just raised by Mr. Stevens is just to strike one of the provisions in the development overlay, because there's other provisions in it. There's a one-story provision that then allows the greater lot coverage for the one story, and there's the rear setback provision in there. So FAR is just one of 3 or 4 provisions.
Thank you.
There's a Moore Lane aesthetic treatment standard, and might be one more.
Right, so just what was just raised by Mr. Stevens is just one part of the development overlay, so it doesn't have that same issue that came up.
So somebody should, if somebody wants to make a motion, it's probably a good idea to do the two ordinances together, and that would be changing the lot size. And then whatever that motion is, be specific as to what is in the overlay
What do
zone.
you mean change the lot size?
Well, that's the first ordinance, changing it to 7,500.
To 7,500.
Yeah, that's the second.
I'll make that motion.
But the second one, which we might want to do together, so we know exactly what we're approving, as far as standards, would be, what do you want to have in the overlay zone? And we've got floor area ratio, we've got single story, we've got rear yard setback, and we've got treatment on Moore Lane. What else is in there?
So if you go to page 12 of the staff report, that is the page of the second ordinance, the development overlay zone ordinance. And once you get to page 12.
We have the rear yard, and then we have a restriction on access to Moore Lane, and then an aesthetic presentation to Moore Lane in terms of how that's ultimately designed. So those are additional standards.
So on page 12 is ordinance 1263, the second ordinance. In your motion to introduce, you would state whether you want to keep all numbers 3 through 7 in there, or strike one of them, or modify one of them, or modify one of them.
I would support a floor ratio of 45%. John, I think going down to 35 is too low at this point. If we were starting from the very beginning, maybe that would be reasonable, but with staff's recommendation, I'm comfortable with that.
I could go
lower
along
than
with
what
that.
the Planning Commission recommended.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think 35 at this point
It's too small.
is
Too low.
And is that number 4 as it's written here in the, on page 4, or page 12 down at the bottom, page 4 at the top of ordinance 1263? It talks about.
No, the current ordinance is the Planning Commission's recommendation, which was the 55%.
Right, okay, so what do we need to change in that, Dennis? On number, so that's number 4, and it says, where we get the floor area ratio, it does say for any 2-story residential dwelling unit shall be 55%, including the garage area. Porches, patio, covers, gazebos, and other similar unenclosed structures shall not be included in the floor area ratio calculation.
So to be clear, staff's recommendation would be to change it to 45%, excluding the first 400 square feet of garage area. That's would be the change. Shall be 45%, excluding the first 400 square feet of garage area.
And it may be helpful too to add on whether the patios, porches, just to have that in the ordinance as well.
Well, that would remain. So, right? That sentence. You're saying that the last sentence of number 4 remains.
Correct.
Right, that's what I said. So the only change to number 4 would be, instead of saying shall be 55%, including the garage area, should be changed to shall be 45%, excluding the first 400 square feet of garage area. That was staff's recommendation.
Yeah, I think a study session would be fine, but I don't think the gentleman wants to wait another month or so for us to go through a study session.
So, do you have a motion? Is that a motion?
Well,
that
that's
you're
part of
making?
the motion. Also, I believe in the 15-foot rear setback.
Okay.
I don't know, do you want to put your trees in there?
Well, I would love to put the trees in there. If you support me, Dennis, I'll.
If that's
Street trees.
reasonable, I'm not opposed to the trees.
Well, I think, Emmett, you had a motion pending, right?
I can't, I forgot it.
Oh, all right, well, then it's gone.
Okay, so Dennis was
Okay,
just explaining what might be the motion.
As
Emmett,
Dennis
go
is
ahead.
talking, okay?
Okay,
Go ahead, Emmett.
I'd like to just talk about this rear yard setback, okay? I kind of agree, I agree with the 15-foot, across. I would be interested if anybody was interested in doing a 12-foot setback for the first house, that they give the builder a little bit of more flexibility of moving around a little bit, because we didn't, that's in concurrence with the planning commission, where they recommended 12 all the way around, so the staff is getting, I hate to say it this way, but their way for the 15, and maybe we could give the guy a little bit of flexibility with that first lot.
I can go with that.
In the spirit of compromise, I would agree that one lot only.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay.
Okay, so
So I
I
don't
guess
know
why
how
don't
we
we-
write this up, or say it, or what do we do?
So I think, is that in the form of a motion then? Emmett, you're moving approval of the first ordinance, 1262, and the second one with the changes you talked about.
Move approval.
Why don't we have Deborah read the titles of both of those ordinances?
Ordinance 1262, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, amending the official zoning map to change the zone from single-family 16,000, single-family 16,000, to single-family 7,500, with a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, and Development Standards Overlay Zone Number 2, SF 7500 through DS2, for the properties located at 216 North Walnut Avenue, 300 North Walnut Avenue, 343 Moore Lane, and unaddressed properties.
It'd be appropriate to read the other ordinance title.
Ordinance 1263, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, adopting Municipal Code Text Amendment Number 18-01 to create Development Standards Overlay Zone Number 2.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Second. And let's just be clear on what's in that overlay zone.
So that's what I was
First
just.
of all, we're going down to 7,500 square feet.
That's the
That's what.
first one.
The FAR is going to be 45, and the setback is going to be 15 feet, except for the one.
Lot number 1.
Lot one.
Number one, which could be
Maybe
12.
12 feet.
The one-story lots.
Right?
Me? Okay. Okay, so I understand the changes to the exhibit would be on item number 4. And on item number 4, it would say 45% excluding the first 400 square feet of garage area in lieu of 55 including. Okay? And then on item number 5, I think it should probably, I got to work out the exact language, but I understand the intent is, and I don't want to say lot 1, I want to say all one-story lots.
Correct. So it'd be the
Okay,
ones that
because
are
I could have other one-story lots if and when Mr. Bailey develops. So the rear yard on any one-story lot may be 12 feet.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't know I'll figure out the final language, but I understand the intent of that. And then those are the changes that I have.
Correct, and what I was going to point out is that if this motion carries, this is to introduce the ordinances, so when they come back for second reading, they'll have the exact.
We can double check to make sure we got the language correct, but I just want to be careful about how I write number 5, because it does apply to the Bailey property, which is not part of the subdivision.
And Emmett, there was a matter of the street trees. Was that included in your motion or not as an additional change or an additional
Okay.
requirement?
So you can have a street tree standard in here. I think we would be better off making it a track condition, personally.
And that's where it is right now.
Okay.
So it could come up in the tentative track map.
That's fine. That's fine. I understand. All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion about this?
We're leaving the street 36?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay, no discussion. Any discussion, Ryan? Just going to make my comments. I'm not going to support the motion. I appreciate making these a little bit more compatible. However, in my opinion, this property is different than the properties that were mentioned before, Brandywine and Lone Hill, because those are sort of isolated. They're not surrounded by existing single-family neighborhoods. The compatibility issue is a big one for me, and I think, in my opinion, we did give direction back 3.5 years, I think it was November of 2015, we gave direction that these homes had to fit in, had to be compatible. Staff worked for 3.5 years, and that's why it's taken so long, because staff worked and worked to try to get the developer to see their point of view, which was really the council's point of view when we entered into this way back when. Our duty is not to developers to make sure that they can make a buck out of what they've done. Our duty is, we want that to happen, of course, but we want whatever they do to add to the city of San Dimas. Our duty is to the community and the people that live here, and keeping it that smaller, quieter community that we all love. And so for those reasons, I could probably go on for another while, but I'll stop. I'm going to vote against this motion. So we'll have Deborah read the roll.
Do a roll call.
Yeah, roll call vote.
Councilmember Badar.
Yes.
Councilmember Berton.
Yes.
Councilmember Evans.
No.
I thought we didn't have a street tree.
Councilmember Viana.
Yes.
Okay.
This is on.
Motion carries by a vote of 3-1. That's the introduction of the ordinance. We'll come back for a second reading at our next meeting. All right, we're going to move on to the tentative track map, and I think we can take that now. There haven't been that many changes. So,
Mayor Pro Tem Ebner, on page 21 and the council, page 21 is part of the resolution with the conditions of approval for the tentative track map. And at the top of page 21 is where you'll see the requirements for street improvements. And specifically at the top of that chart is the new street. And so right now, the way it's written is the sidewalk is required for the new street, and that would be the entire new street. And then if you go to street trees, it's got the 3 stars, and the 3 stars say provide private street trees. And so this is where there could be modifications if you so desire.
so that's where we would add street trees that are in the public right of way. And is there any support for that? I'm not gonna.
I'm okay with, well, I guess what I'm not okay with is the notion of windy sidewalks to accommodate the tree. I think what Larry described earlier as having it as a easement right on the property I'd be amenable to that. I just don't like the idea. We have the windy sidewalks over here by Holy Name of Mary, and I've run that every once in a while, and it just doesn't work well, especially with the tree growth, so.
Yeah, what we would suggest is where that, let's see, we probably leave the 3 asterisks and say, provide street trees, period, and then provide a easement to the city of San Dimas for maintenance of said street trees, and then we'll figure out the width of it. But
This
it
is on
will
both
be
sides
behind
of
the
the-
utility easement.
On both sides of the street.
On both sides of the street. It will be behind the utility, so it'll be at least probably 10 feet away from the curb, plus or minus, depending upon the type of tree. And then the other thing we should also do is condition 39 on page 24. It says provide street trees, on Walnut. It should say, instead of on Walnut Avenue, it should say throughout the tract. And then we'll pick the species based upon our street tree plan, whatever it ends up being. I think you showed an example. I think the flame tree was the first choice, but there's 1 or 2 options depending upon the circumstances. So we'll use the street tree palette to determine the tree and the exact placement when we get into the design process.
Deborah, do you want to read the title of Resolution 2018-47? And we'll probably have a motion after that.
Resolution 2018-47, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, approving tentative track map 73584, tentative track map 16-01. A request to consolidate 4 existing parcels with a total area of 3.17 acres to subdivide into 12 residential parcels at 300 North Walnut Avenue, 342 Moore Lane, and unaddressed properties.
Is there a motion to waive further reading and adopt that tract map with the changes Larry mentioned? We have a motion and a second. I'm going to oppose it. Do we need to do a roll call again?
Why are you going to oppose it, ask?
Well, the trees are not in the right spot, number one. And, yeah, it really matters where the trees are. I mean, if you drive down any street that has street trees by the curb and they form a canopy, this is a tract map, and I think there's enough votes to pass it, so.
Larry, why can't the trees be where John wants them to be?
Well, if the trees are adjacent to the curb and there is a sidewalk, then the sidewalk has to wind around the street tree. And then I need a sidewalk easement instead of a planting easement. And we think it's better behind.
This street is a short street. So number one, it probably doesn't need to be 36 feet wide. It doesn't need parking on both sides. Secondly, right across the street, the rest of 3rd Street has no sidewalks for the better part of that street. And between Iglesia and San Dimas Avenue, 3rd Street has a sidewalk on one side of the street and not a sidewalk on the other. There are 4 houses that would not have a sidewalk in front of them on the south side of the street. And one's where the bulb starts, so I don't know if you would even count that one. So there's a way of putting straight sidewalks, a straight sidewalk on one side of the street and going all the way around the bulb if they want to. And not having the sidewalk on the other if you want to do that. The residents of those 4 houses, or maybe 3 is what it ends up really being, I don't think it's going to be a big danger to walk across the street at the end of a cul-de-sac And if you would make the street narrower, and I'm not, I know staff is against that, narrower streets are safer because traffic drives slower on narrower streets. Streets with trees close to the curb are safer because the street appears narrower. So there's all these reasons to have the trees there, to have the street narrower, but if we can't have that, just not have the sidewalk on the other side. So the tree should be there adjacent to the sidewalk. That's all there is to it. But that's, I'll go, we'll have a roll call on whatever the motion is.
Anything more that, Dennis, you want to throw in
No,
something?
no, that's.
You guys good? Okay, so we'll have a roll call on the motion as it was made. Well, we're doing the motion on the resolution 2018-47, so we haven't voted on that yet.
So, I did a cut and paste. Councilmember Badar. Councilmember Bertone.
Yes.
Councilmember Ebner.
No.
Councilmember Vienna.
Yes.
That passes by a 3-1 vote.
3-1 vote.
Now, did you
And-
insinuate, Larry, that this could change during this process? And
That part won't. I assume that the motion did include the requirement for a street tree
Right.
and a planting easement, understanding that the street tree will be behind the sidewalk and the utility easement.
Correct.
And that there will be sidewalks on both sides. So that's the way I understand the motion, so correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you are right.
Okay.
That's the way we understand it. We have one more matter, and that's this, the mitigated negative declaration of the environmental impact for the zone change, the text amendment with the overlay and the track map. So there's a environmental resolution we have to do. Is there any discussion on that? Deborah, would you want to read the title of that? That's Resolution 2018-48.
Resolution 2018-48, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, certifying the mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact for zone change number 16-01, Municipal Code Text Amendment number 18-01, tentative track map number 73584, TTM-16-01, DPRB case numbers 16-02 and 03 and 04, and tree removal permit number 16-12 pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act of 1970 as amended.
Is there a motion to waive further reading and adopt resolution?
So moved.
I am not going to oppose this one. Do we need a roll call? Let's just say all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none opposed, it's 4-0 with one abstention. In fact, there's one abstention on all of those motions we had. And that I think does it for the Walnut Avenue project.
I just want to say one thing about trees, Larry. I would hope that in this process, and also to the developer, that we save as many trees as possible. I know that we can't save them all. And one thing that the developer did say, which I have a little experience with the work that I've done in Benelli Park, is that it's almost impossible to move an oak tree. And we've done that in the past in other developments in the city. And they look great for a couple of years, and then they just die. Even though I would love to save every oak tree possible, he is right that it is extremely difficult to move an oak tree and have it last more than 5 years.
And we've relocated them, and we've tried to preserve them in place, and we've tried a lot of different techniques. We will look at the trees, the mature trees carefully as part of the tree removal permit. And please be aware that the council does have the ability to call that up for review if they think that the board didn't properly consider the tree removal impacts when we make that decision.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. I took my break. Okay, we'll call the city council meeting to order. Go to item number 7, oral communications. If there were any members of the audience, this would be the time for them to speak. I don't see anybody in the audience who wants to speak. So we'll go to the city manager.
Just have a couple of things. One is to establish a date for the fall council staff retreat. Put a couple of dates on the agenda for your consideration, Monday the 15th or Monday the 22nd of October from 5 to 9. Want to just kind of tell us if those dates work?
Both of the dates work for me.
Both work for me as well.
I'm unavailable on the 22nd.
Is everyone available on the 15th then?
Hang on. Figure out how to get to the 15th.
Hey.
15th, I'm
got to
okay.
this paper calendar real quick.
I'm okay. Is everybody okay on the 15th? Was that the?
I think we ought to have it on Saturday. Yeah, I'm okay. 15th's okay?
Okay, then put it on your calendars. We'll remind you about it. The next item is to provide an update. We really will be having on the mayor's show this Thursday evening a live presentation of the last CERT class that's been ongoing. Their last class is on Thursday night, and so it'll be included in part of the live show of the mayor. We'll actually be broadcasting an exercise that the CERT class is conducting. We'll have a chance to interview the instructors and participants of the CERT, class itself, and then we will present the graduation certificates to those who will be graduating this Thursday night. So that would be the 30th of August, 7 p.m. on Channel 3 will be the live broadcast. And please tune in. I think you'll find it interesting to see a piece of what the CERT program is and the training.
Just real quick, the study sessions from 5 to 9?
5 to 9 for the retreat.
We already had it.
The other item is
Let's
just...
verify that it's not close, not the last CERT class, it's the one that's just graduating.
Yeah, it is...
The grad-
Hopefully we'll have further CERT
Yeah,
It's the last class of this class.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing to kind of bring up is we're asked to kind of provide a little bit of information with respect to a storm drain project that's associated with the Brandywine development. And so we prepared a graphic that I can just kind of walk through. Thanks, Sherry, for doing this. The red area indicates the area where construction will be taking place to abandon the current storm drain system that's there and construct a new one. So that's the general location. It's really across the street from the entrance to the Brandywine development. It's a little bit more of a close-up. The reason why we've been asked to provide a bit more information is there are trees that are located along the east side of San Dimas Avenue. There's 5 of them. They're shown and represented on this particular drawing. You can see the entrance to the Brandywine is to the left, where the black lines are. The proposal involves downsizing the existing line from a 72-inch to a 36-inch, and then abandoning that old storm drain line and constructing a new line in its place. The new line affects the removal of the old line, the construction of the new line affects those trees and their root structures, some of them very directly, but all of them indirectly. So this can kind of give another explanation about, you can see the 5 trees that are involved. The blue line is the new sewer line that will be constructed. To the north or to the upper side where the trees are, those dashed lines are the existing 72-inch sewer, which will be removed because it will no longer be necessary. We're downsizing it to accommodate the new blue line pipe system that will be going as shown on the diagram. This is a little more helpful, I think, so you can see the relationship of the existing trees. So that's the trees that are planted along that street. You can see they're very close to the curb. They're planted there because of the utilities that are underneath. It's just we couldn't put them where we normally would put them to achieve a good canopy. So they're within a foot to foot and a half of the curb because that's the best way we could get them in with all the other utilities in that area. So you can see where the tree is in relation to the curb. The new storm drain line is inside the curb, as you can see there, and it's a smaller diameter, 24-inch. And you can see the 72-inch storm drain line to the right-hand side of the tree, which will be downsized and removed. Rather than leave the old pipe in the ground that won't be used, it makes more sense to remove it so that it doesn't develop a sinkhole or something like that in future as it fails, and also just removes an unneeded utility out of that right-of-way. So when we would dig down to remove that and dig down to install the new, you can see how it would affect the tree. And so the process, see, how late is it right now? It's it'll impact those 5 trees by being located so close to the excavation necessary for the installation of the new and removal of the old. So it makes it, the best solution is to remove those trees, but they will then be replanted, and you can see that with the 72-inch storm drain line removed, it allows a much better planting environment for that tree. Its canopy can then arch out a little bit more. Right now, if a truck comes by, it trims that tree for us because there's a lane right there. So by being able to plant new species of oak where now that removed line will be, it allows that tree to flourish much more. It'll have a better canopy look and be able to create the kind of environment we're looking for on St. Louis Avenue. So in one way, it actually is a better situation for the tree. But we wanted to take the time to explain it to the public if they're still tuned in so that they could see and know what will be happening, because the contractors would like to move forward with this project very soon. And so those trees, they're marked now, and as part of the construction, they'll be removed and all this construction will take place, and then new trees will be planted as we've described. So wanted to provide that as an update on that particular project so people know what's going on.
Thanks, Blaine.
That's all I have.
Okay, City Attorney?
Yes, I did want to note that on our agenda, we have a closed session conference with legal counsel. It's existing litigation. It's the City of San Dimas versus Metro Gold Line Authority. We will be meeting and we'll be discussing settlement terms. After the meeting, I will come out into open session and make announcements as appropriate.
Thank you. Do any council members have a report to make on meetings attended at the expense of the city since the last meeting? Hearing no reports, we'll go on to the individual members' comments and updates. Start with Ryan.
First and foremost, I just wanted to thank staff for all their work on everything that went down this evening. It's been a long road, and the Planning Commission, I think, put a lot of effort into this, so I'm glad to see we worked through the problem. The next thing is I also want to thank staff and council for supporting the CERT program. My wife actually attended the first couple sessions of this CERT class. She had a couple conflicts, so she's going to have to make up a couple sessions. But it's been great watching folks come in. The turnout was really good. And it's great to see more and more people getting involved. So I look forward to their graduation. And lastly, there is an equestrian commission vacancy that closes on the 31st. So if you're interested in joining the equestrian commission, go ahead and go on to, I believe they can go to the city website, or you can contact the city clerk and she'll be able to give you the information on how to apply. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Well, that makes me think, Ryan, and thanks for bringing up those commission vacancies, because we like getting as many applicants as possible. I too have a note that the Parks and Rec Commission vacancy, that the applications for that close on Friday as well, the 31st. So you have your choice, parks or horses.
Horses.
Two other things briefly. Thank you to the council for the healthy discussion and staff, of course, for providing everything on the Walnut Avenue project. I appreciate everybody looking at my slides and, perhaps getting some, planning some ideas that we'll talk about at another time. But no, it was a good discussion. I know it took a long time, but, these deliberative things, they should take a long time. Lastly, for the retreat we're going to be having, I'd like to see a progress report on the downtown specific plan, and perhaps kind of a TBD, other downtown items, you know, haven't really thought about it that much, but parking requirements and where we are with that, outdoor dining, and actually maybe presenting some ideas on changing our requirements for the fences, and an update on the flowers and trees.
Update on fences?
Flowers and trees. Oh, and the other one, fences, yeah, outdoor dining. For the outdoor dining.
Oh.
Yeah, the outdoor dining fences. Well, we've all been at different cities and just noticed how it's handled differently, and in fact, quite a lot differently in some other cities. And we might want to add that to our toolbox, so to speak, which makes it perhaps easier for people to do that kind of thing.
I agree.
You go to Seattle and see how they do it.
I don't know, do they?
It's like a homeless encampment.
Oh, that kind of outdoor thing.
I really don't have anything other than the fact that I do want to encourage us to continue looking at this FAR program.
Yeah.
I think we need that study session, and I think it needs to be more than just a 5-minute blip.
Right.
I would just like to have staff, especially Larry and Blaine, thank Jennifer for the job she did with the Walnut property. And John, I thought you did an excellent job getting into the details. Even though you voted no 3 times, you did make a big difference. I mean, we changed the back setback, we changed the floor ratio, and we got the trees. And so, you know, I think some progress was made. It's not a perfect project, but I think, you know, your hard work paid off.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Okay, I have nothing to add, so we will be recessing the council meeting and reconvening in the conference room next door for a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, as our city attorney has just described. And then when after the adjournment and after the city attorney has explained what we did or did not do, we will reconvene as city council on September 11 at 7 p.m. So we'll meet in 5 minutes or whatever it takes.